Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin our regular council meeting, I would like to acknowledge that we are holding this evening's meeting on the territory of the Wasanic people. I'd now like to call our regular council meeting of Monday, August 12th to order. Before we begin with our usual public participation period, I'd like to clarify that we actually have three separate opportunities on tonight's agenda for the public to speak. In a moment, we will have our usual public participation period, where members of the public may come to the microphone and make their views known or ask questions. After that public participation closes, we'll have a public hearing regarding recreational cannabis. We ask those who wish to speak on that topic to wait until after the general public participation period and We ask those who wish to speak on the topic to wait after the general public participation period and speak during the public hearing. After the public hearing, we will have a presentation this evening regarding applications for the use of shipping containers by the proponent on Harbour Road. After the presentation, we will have a special public participation period, and we ask speakers on that topic to wait until that time. I'd now like to open our general participation period and ask those wishing to speak to come forward. Please state your name and address, and please keep your remarks to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, good evening. My name is Linda Dryden, and I am the chair of the board of St. Andrew's Abbeyfield on 5th Street. And I just want to thank you very much for your consideration of our submission for a tax exemption, and just let you know that I am here to respond to any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For a second time, do we have anybody wishing to address public participation? And for a third time, anyone wishing to address public participation? Seeing none, I'll call a close to our public participation period and now move to item 1B, our public hearing. I'd like to begin with an opening statement, which is normally given by the mayor at public hearings. Public hearings are a statutory requirement under the Local Government Act for official community plan amendment and zoning amendment applications. Tonight's public hearing is being held because Council is considering making an amendment to the zoning bylaw. Public hearings are an opportunity for any person who believes their interest in property is affected to present their views and be heard. There is no limit on the length of time a person may speak, and there is no limit on the number of times a person may speak. For Council's benefit in our deliberations, we ask speakers to clearly make your points and your views. Council welcomes input from speakers, and our role during the public hearing is to listen, have an open mind, and when the speaker is finished, to ask questions for clarification. Our role is not to challenge speakers on what they say and not to debate with speakers on their points. We request that speakers, council, and members of the public in attendance remain respectful at all times in order to allow all views to be heard. Written submissions have been copied and circulated to council, including those that were received during the day today. We will not read them aloud. Letter writers may read their letters, but with the knowledge that council has received and read them. Once the public hearing is closed, council may not receive any additional information other than to clarify issues raised during the public hearing. Council will deliberate, make their views known, and make a decision later in the evening under the bylaws section of the agenda. I'd now like to ask our CAO, Mr. Humble, to please read the public hearing notice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the Town of Sydney Notice of Public Hearing for bylaw number 2174, dealing with retail cannabis. So it reads, notice has been given that the Council of the Town of Sydney will hold a public hearing in respect of bylaw number 2174, being a proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 2015 of the Town of Sydney. The purpose of bylaw number 2174 is to add regulations to the zoning bylaw that would allow the retail sale of cannabis products in parts of Sydney's downtown commercial C1 zone. The bylaw would also permit the processing and manufacturing of cannabis products in Sydney's industrial M1 zone in the Sydney Business Park. All persons who believe that their property has been affected by the proposed amending bylaw will be afforded a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw at this evening's public hearing. Written submissions could be received at the Town Hall prior to 4 p.m. or at the public hearing itself here this evening. Copies of the proposed bylaw, as well as all background documentation, were made available for inspection during normal working hours of 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday to Friday, from July 8th to August 12th at the Town of Sydney Town Hall. All correspondence submitted forms part of the public record and may be published in a meeting agenda. This was first advertised in the newspaper on August 2nd and again advertised on August 7th in the Peninsula News Review. I should also point out, Mr. Mayor, beyond the statutory requirements for public notice, the town also undertook additional notification via social media. There were Facebook posts, Twitter posts. There was an additional newspaper ad placed in the Peninsula News Review on July 17th. And also letters were sent out to a number of organizations, including the School District, number 63, the Sydney Downtown Business Improvement Area Society, Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, Island Health, the District of North Saanich, Victoria International Airport, and Sydney North Saanich RCMP Detachment regarding the proposed bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. I will now open the public hearing. I ask those wishing to speak to please approach the microphone, and for the record, clearly state your name and address. Please make your points and indicate whether you are in favor or opposed to the bylaw amendment.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Teresa Wright, and I live at 2355 Breather Avenue in Sydney. I agree that a cannabis store could open in Sydney. I just object to it opening on Beacon Avenue or James White Boulevard. The school is just down the road from James White and 7th. It's only a block away. There's also a daycare at Rest Haven and James White. Plus there's also Lulu's daycare between Beacon and James White Boulevard, just going to open in September. Plus at the foot of Beacon, we have the park where all the children play. Daily, we see them down there. So I have no objection to the store opening, just not right on our main street. I have concerns about loitering as well as lineups, as there's been a cannabis shortage. And through the media, I understand that it's going to be quite a while before it's resolved. So we'll have traffic and lineups outside a store if it's on Beacon, and I don't think that's what our town is about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gail Hazelhurst. I live on Rest Haven Drive in Sydney, and I am concerned about making Sydney a recreational marijuana drug destination, as there are so many better businesses to bring to Sydney that are a better fit. I am concerned about many things associated with this idea. So far, only Victoria has a cannabis store, and do we want Sydney to possibly be the only other town on the peninsula to have one, which would draw a lot of recreational drug users to Sydney? With the current licensing procedure being so long and expensive, the product for sale will be higher priced than the illegal black market cannabis products, and they may not survive financially as a result and go out of business. There are much better retail and service companies to bring to Sydney instead. I'm also concerned that recreational marijuana is stronger with higher THC levels, and we will have more impaired drivers in Sydney who are using it. As far as I know, the police have not developed a method for testing impaired marijuana drivers, so these drivers will not be discouraged from driving while under the influence. With Sydney's elderly population moving slowly across the streets, in crosswalks and on the sidewalks, this could be a problem. Then there is the issue of where the marijuana will be smoked, as the smoke has a very strong, unpleasant odor, and some people have respiratory issues and are allergic to it, especially the elderly. I feel a cannabis store is a bad fit for Sydney. This is not what Sydney is about. Please do not approve this, as it will not improve the quality of life here. I have no objection to medical marijuana, and I think that is a good idea, but recreational marijuana is another thing entirely. I also hope that you will accept responses to this issue only from Sydney residents and not those living outside Sydney who may have a different agenda, as it is the residents of Sydney who will be most impacted by this. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. We'll call for a second time if there is anyone else wishing to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Thank you.
My husband and I are hoping to open a cannabis store here in Sydney. Could you speak in the mic? And we
If you
can,
could please give us your
certainly.
name and
It's
and
Cindy
address, please.
Pendergast, and we're
And Brad Stiles.
and Brad Stiles. Forgive me, I'm a little nervous.
And your address, please.
It's we're going to be at 2410 Beacon Avenue, hopefully, and we do intend to open a licensed and legal cannabis store if we have the support of Sydney, and we do believe we have mostly got that support. We in fact spent the day going up and down Beacon Avenue talking to retailers. We missed you, Mayor McNeil Smith, you weren't there. And we do believe we have the support. We intend to do everything legally. We intend to do everything that will benefit Sydney. We'd like to keep people shopping in Sydney. We'd like to keep them from going into Victoria. And we'd also like to keep people employed in Sydney. So we're here to answer any questions after the meeting, if anyone has any. Go ahead,
Also,
Brad.
just a couple of other things. The store is going to be upscale. It's going to be, again, government regulated. It's not going to be a head shop, anything like that. So, we just want to portray that and relay that to everybody here. So that's this is Zach. He's also involved. This is Cindy's son, my stepson.
So we're the three bad guys, but hopefully good guys.
Okay.
And we're doing everything we can to really enhance Sydney, to make everybody feel comfortable coming into the store, feel comfortable purchasing legal products, and yes, to enhance Sydney's downtown and to improve our business experience here and to keep people shopping in Sydney. We don't want people going to Victoria. So thank you very much. And again, we're open to questions.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for
Thanks,
your
everyone.
input. I would just like to make a note of clarification. While we have heard that there is an interested proponent interested in opening a cannabis retail location in Sydney, this evening we are only considering making an amendment to our zoning bylaw to permit a retail cannabis location in a particular zone of Sydney, in certain particular areas of the downtown. We are not considering a particular application for a retail location this evening. That would undergo a separate, thorough process should we, depending on how we proceed this evening. Now I'd like to call for a third time if there's anyone else wishing to address council. Please come forward.
My name is Richard Angus, and we live at 2115 Amelia Avenue in Sydney. In prior portions of our life, we have lived in California for several years, and there, because of issues with arthritis, I have learned that CBD products can be extremely beneficial to people who have pain from arthritis and similar types of inflammatory diseases. I would really like to be able to purchase a balm or a salve here in town rather than having to drive 25 or 30 kilometers into Victoria to be able to do it. These CBD products are, as far as I have determined from personal use, extremely beneficial to people who have those kinds of issues. I'm not a smoker of marijuana. I just use it as a salve or a balm for pain from arthritis. And I think with the age of the population of Sydney, there may be quite a number of people in the town who find that having access to these kinds of products might be beneficial to them because of the aches and pains of just getting older. Thank you.
Thank you. I've called for speakers for three times, and seeing none, I'll, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, please come forward.
I'm Elizabeth Dow, and I live at 317 9805 2nd Street. And I echo the previous speaker in terms of a store that would be developing medical marijuana. In the area of gerontology and field of aging, there is a number of research studies that certainly attest to the benefits of the CBD products. And for others that I personally know who are going through cancer treatments and so forth, there are some other products that lessens anxiety and is extremely beneficial. So that's something that, and the other issue too is that the side effects of pharmaceuticals, and I know I'm not talking to that, but the side effects of pharmaceuticals can be very detrimental in terms of falls and all the rest of it, in terms of the aging population. So I think for the people who are applying, I think the market for their product and the tax benefits to the town would definitely be enhanced if it was medical marijuana. I think a shop could be useful. Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Good evening, Dale Hazelhurst, 10348 Rest Haven Drive. I am not in favor of recreational marijuana. A medical marijuana, absolutely. I support that 100%. Why not? If it brings people relief, then I'm all for it. But recreational marijuana, you smoke that to get high. Do we want people coming to Sydney to get high? Now, I would suggest that if you really did a poll of the citizens, the residents of Sydney, they probably wouldn't be in favor of it. I suspect they would be in favor of the medical marijuana. So ultimately, I am not in favor of it. And I would refer to also the comment in Sunday's newspaper, which you probably all read. It's a very good comment talking about the lack of real benefit to the town or the community of marijuana, recreational marijuana. So please give that some consideration and consider Sydney as a whole. The people that live here, the residents, not the people that want to set up a shop here, they probably don't live here. Maybe they'll move here someday, but I suspect they don't. So consider Sydney and its residents. What do we want Sydney to be? Is it a place to come and get high? I hope not. I can't picture the park down at the end by the pier there as a place for smoking pot. Victoria's had lots of issues with this, and I consider those issues to be real. So please do consider that. And again, I will not support recreational marijuana. I've seen plenty of it. In fact, I used to enjoy it myself in my early 20s, and then I took a career path that said, you smoke dope, you drink, there's zero tolerance for that. So it's a career-changing, well, it was a career-changing thing for me. You don't smoke it, you don't drink. So please give it serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Linda Comber, and I live at 10459 Rest Haven Drive in Sydney. I wasn't going to say anything, but I know a lot of people that use both with the TCP and with just the medical part. And I use the medical part, and it helps me sleep, and it helps me feel better and less anxious about things sometimes. And I think we have liquor stores here, and people don't drive here to get drunk. So why would they drive here to get high? They can go to Victoria and other stores that'll be opening soon. And liquor kills a lot of people in accidents. I don't think they've got too much of a number for people that were killed because they were smoking marijuana. So a lot more people die in accidents because of liquor. So I don't see that people are going to flock here to get high. So I think they should have it. People that are older need it for pain and for sleep. And I don't see anything wrong with it. It's legal now. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers this evening, I will bring the public hearing to a close. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'd now like to move on to item 1C under presentations. We have a presentation this evening on zoning amendment application number RZ100101 and development permit application number DP100794 for a number of addresses, 2257, 2281, 2289, 2295, and 2317 Harbor Road. And the application is to allow shipping container as a permitted use under the Marine Industrial Zone, W1.2, in order to legalize the existing 9 shipping containers on the property. We have a presentation on behalf of the applicant this evening by Mr. Michael McGregor from Crease Harmon. Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for that introduction. Hopefully, may I wait a moment just to, I don't want to cut into my time, but...
I may, Mr. McGregor, just interject that, ladies and gentlemen, while we've held the public hearing this evening, Council will be deliberating on the bylaw soon after approval of the agenda. Thank you. Mr. Humble, there may have been people in the waiting to come in. If you, okay. We're having a change of crowd.
This is, thank you. I'm afraid I didn't prepare for this this level of excitement. You let me know when you want me to start.
Thank you.
It's my impression, Your Worship, that that may be the bulk of it.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Michael McGregor. As you know, I am a lawyer and I am the applicant on this zoning amendment application on behalf of my client, Sydney Marina Company Limited, Ltd. To dispel, and I appreciate Council may be very clear about this, my client runs Van Isle Marina. Van Isle Marina is, for the most part, on the north side of Harbor Road. On the south side of Harbor Road, Sydney Marina Co. also operates its boatyard, Van Isle, under the name style of Van Isle, its boatyard. In that boatyard on the south side of Harbor Road for years and years and years and years, they have used shipping containers. Presently, there are 9 shipping containers, sometimes referred to as sea cans. I have heard some concern, and I want to allay that right now. My client is not seeking to do anything different than it has been doing for years on that property, and in fact is prepared to assent to whatever reasonable conditions Council may see fit to impose on the continued use of some or all of those containers. Nothing is changing. It's not my client's intention to seek approval to stack containers, to change the nature of its business in any way. It has just recently occurred and come to my client's attention that this is a technical violation of the W1 Neighborhood Marine Industrial Zone to have shipping containers. That's why we're here. My client is not aware in the 4 years or so since 2015 that those containers have been in place that there's ever been any substantive complaint, not aware of any health issue, not aware of any safety issue, not aware of any aesthetic issue. Moreover, my client, Sydney Marina Co., for a couple of decades, the better part of 20 years prior to 2010, just on the other side of the street, used shipping containers for that entire period of time for 20 years until its business needs changed and it shifted and opened up the boatyard. For those 20 years, my client has no memory of any issue, any safety issue, any health issue, any incident, any complaint. My point is that the evidence is that for an extended period of time, these containers have been used very successfully by my client and by the third parties, I'll speak about them briefly, who are using some of those containers on my client's property without any issue. We appreciate there appears to be a technical issue with the W2 1.2 zone, and that's why we're here seeking an amendment to recognize the fact that these containers in that zone ought to be permitted, the continued use of them ought to be permitted. That's why we're here. There are presently, and have been for some time, 9 containers on the property. It's in your materials. My client owns 4 of those containers, which it uses directly in its own boat maintenance, yard maintenance business in the boatyard. The other containers, 3 different businesses use those containers on the yard. They are marine-related businesses. They will be affected, and their employees will be affected if they are not permitted to continue to use those containers in their businesses. If my client is put to building a purpose-built building in place of these containers, the rent that my client will have to charge these businesses will be substantially greater by a factor of 6 or 7 times what they're presently charging these businesses. Anyone familiar with the area and with Van Allen Marina will know that my client is meticulous in the upkeep and maintenance of its property. Same goes for these containers. It's in your materials. They're painted white. They're kept up very nicely. Having said that, they're very hard to see from the street. My client's property is bounded by cedar trees, and in fact, I assume that's why this has gone for years without any notice or any issue, in part because they're really frankly not visible at all. Shipping containers in that area have been in use not just by my clients but by the other properties in that area for a very long time as well, and those containers are perfectly visible, no complaint from us, from the street. You can take a drive up the street and you'll see plenty of containers used by the other marine businesses as well, and to the best of our clients' knowledge, we're not aware of any incidents with the containers owned by those other owners on the road either. I am not going to argue the suggestion by town staff that a purpose-built building could achieve the same thing. No question that a purpose-built building could achieve the same thing. But we respectfully submit in the circumstances where we have something that is working quite well, that has worked for a very long time, that has not caused any substantive issues that my client is aware of or that I'm aware of, that is supporting other businesses, that to put my client in the position of having to incur the costs and pass those costs on to third parties is not in keeping with the spirit of the OCP. And in connection with that, purpose-built buildings obviously can be built in accordance with the OCP and consistent with it. Staff recognizes that in the report that shipping containers are not inconsistent in this area. This is a marine area. It's a marine area, it's a marine zone. These containers have been here forever. They haven't caused an issue. we are not looking at a proliferation. My client is not suggesting under any circumstances that it changes business or increases the containers. One further point, this zone, the boatyard, and there was reference to several properties, I just want to make it clear, all of the properties, all of the PID numbers that you identified, those collectively together make up what is my client's boatyard. There's a single boatyard legally made up of several parcels. It's one boatyard. It's not a bunch of properties. Nothing has changed. It's exactly the same. My client would prefer to have an amendment that would allow it to continue using all of the containers for its own benefit and the benefit of the third parties. But there are 4 containers it's using that are essential to its business. If it could have continued use of those containers, that would be very helpful in the circumstances, obviously. And it would be prepared to limit those containers further to 2 if council felt that that was absolutely necessary. So I'm here tonight saying we would like the status quo to be confirmed, but if for whatever reason council feels that this needs to be restricted, at the end of the day, if my client could have 2 of those 9 containers left for its own use, that would likely satisfy the essential needs of its own business. It's here saying that it would like to continue to use all 9 because they're useful to third parties, and that's a benefit to the community, and that has an economic benefit, and we do want that. But if we can't have that, we could make do with 4, and we could live with 2. We have no intention of ever stacking them. We have no intention of ever not maintaining them properly, and we're prepared to move them anywhere on the property. The diagrams are in the staff report. Anywhere on property. There was a suggestion by staff that these containers being on the side of the property that's nearest the residential neighborhood might be an issue. We're prepared to move those if if council would prefer that they be moved. That's not an issue. Those are my submissions. In essence, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'll now open it up to, before we go to the public participation, I'll open it up to council for questions. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering if you can help me understand a bit better the use of those containers by the third parties that you mentioned. So are they using them strictly to store materials and they have business addresses elsewhere in the area or within Sydney, or are they operating a business out of those containers?
Thank you for your question, Madam Councillor. This is my understanding, but I will say that I understand that representatives of 2 of the other businesses, which I'll identify for you, are here tonight, so I will let them correct me if I am wrong. I understand that it's a mixed bag, to answer your question. Phil Brooks, which is one of the businesses on the north side, has a container. It's not running a business out of there, but it's using it for storage. That's my understanding. 2 other businesses that have containers. One is R&R Marine, which has 1 container, and the other business is Prime Yacht Systems. My understanding is that Prime Yacht Systems is using this as office space and office use, and that R&R may be doing some of the same and have some storage as well. But these, like I say, the representatives are here, and I don't want to speak out of turn on their part. Okay. So it's a mixed bag, to answer your question. It's not strictly storage.
I guess you wouldn't know. It's probably more a question for our staff then, in terms of whether that's something that's permitted in terms of operating a business in Sydney out of a storage container on someone else's property. So,
Councillor O'Keefe, I'll take that question and pass it on to staff.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, a business needs a licensing address in Sydney. If they're operating a business on a property owned by another party, they need owner approval before the town will accept a business license application. I can't recall offhand if we have business licenses for those two businesses that were mentioned, the three businesses. I'd have to check the town records for that.
If I might, I don't want to interject
Certainly.
out of turn. I would just hate for those businesses, if they have representatives here, to not have an opportunity to speak on this point. That's all.
Certainly, please refer to them if you wish.
Is there R&R, who wants? Thank you. Just give me your name and identify with your business.
Good evening. My name is Robin Shad, and I am the owner of R&R Marine. We use the Seacan strictly for storage. We do not run a business out of the Seacan. We keep our consumable supplies there while we work in the boatyard. There is no business transactions happening in a Seacan. We are a mobile business. We're a home-based style business, and this benefits us greatly. So that is really what we use it for. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor O'Keefe, did you have any other questions? Okay. Do other councillors, sorry, go ahead, Mr. McRae.
If we may, do we have someone from Prime Yacht? I thought. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Hi, Town Council, Mayor. I'm the owner of Prime Yacht Systems. We're a marine electrical electronics business based out of Victoria. We currently have 3 shipping containers here. We use one as storage, one as a bit of a shop with a bandsaw stuff in it so we can fabricate as needed, and then one as a muster point so we can kind of meet if we're in the area and work on boats that way. Our whole business is mobile, much like R&R's, and we use that mobility to be as effective as possible with what we deal with. We deal with a lot of electrical safety issues and things like that, so that's the whole reason behind the shipping containers, is to be as mobile as possible and to be on top of it and present when an issue arises. So that's the question.
Thank you. I think so, unless. It's storage. And it's storage. I understand that we don't have a representative from Philbrooks here tonight, but my client confirms that it is strictly storage, and to the best of my clients and my knowledge, they are a fully licensed business, Philbrooks in Sydney, and have been for a long time.
Councillor Garnett.
Thank you for the discussion. Just out of curiosity, is there a reason why when the development permit was taken out in 2009, the building was never constructed that you're aware of?
Off the top of my head, I do not have an answer for that. I could certainly inquire of my client for that answer, and would be happy to come back with that answer. In the circumstances, and I can say that the building, the permit was for an 18,000 square foot building, which in the circumstances would be likely roughly millions of dollars at this point, and not an undertaking that could be compared to what they have here.
Thank you.
Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have, actually, I think we'll need some response from Prime Yacht and R&R, but my question is, how many employees do you have working in Sydney?
Okay. So R&R 2? Yeah. I hear R&R 2.
And same here,
okay. 2 for Prime.
And Van On?
We have 35 employees.
Currently 35.
And Philbrooks has around 100, I believe.
Philbrooks has around 100.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. McGregor, and I appreciate each of these companies and their contribution to the local economy and the work that's done out of this facility. I do want some clarification. You made reference to this relating to a technical issue with respect to the neighborhood marine industrial zone during your presentation. In your written submission, you refer to bylaw 2015 and forbidding the presence of shipping containers in any zone but for industrial zones. in which the rental of shipping containers is a fully permitted activity. So I assume the technicality you're referring to is that the reference to CCANs is included within the bylaw in relation to industrial zones. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's
And
correct.
if I may then, to staff, the further reference here is with respect to the rental of shipping containers. To staff, is that the limit to which sea containers may be stored on industrial properties for rental purposes?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, yes, in the zoning bylaw, the industrial zone, the M1 zone, west of Highway 17, that allows the sale or rental of machinery, heavy equipment, or shipping containers. So shipping containers can be in the industrial area if they are for sale or for rent. They can't be sited on an M1 industrial zone property for storing goods. That's not permitted there either, just as it is not permitted in the marine industrial zone, W1 or W1.2.
And so to clarify, if I may, Mr. Mayor, through to staff, so the rental in the case of the scenario at Van Isle where these additional containers at Van Isle aren't using directed are being rented, would not then meet the description of this technical issue in your opinion?
The properties are zoned different things, so I think in the M1 zone industrial, the intent is not to rent a shipping container for someone to use it on site and rent it and keep it on the site. I think it's like the shipping container business that we see on the west side that is selling the shipping containers for clients or customers to take elsewhere and use, or rent them to take away and use.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions? Okay, I'd now like to thank you, Mr. McGregor. We may have questions from the public, but I'll just proceed with starting the public participation.
I'll stand down then, but I'm happy to answer or take any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we begin the public participation period associated with this presentation, I'd like to point out that it is not a statutory requirement, but is being provided by Council in order to allow the public the earliest opportunity to obtain information with respect to the proposal. Please note this is the first stage of the process and the first time that Council has seen this application and proposal. The purpose of public participation is to give the public an opportunity to ask questions, get clarification. Members of the public may ask questions of Council, they may ask questions of the proponent, or they may ask questions of staff. If the questions are not directed to Council, we ask that you direct them through myself as chair to Mr. McGregor or to staff. We ask everyone to keep the dialogue respectful, and this won't be your only opportunity to provide input. If Council chooses to take this to the next stage, you would have the opportunity to express your views at any time by letter or email, or speak at a future public participation meeting at Council. And if it does proceed, it could proceed to a future public hearing. Thank you. I'll now open the public participation period. If those wishing to speak could approach the microphone.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, my name is John Leggett. I live at 10400 All Bay Road, next to the property in question. I'd like to take issue with most of Michael's points. When I first came here in 1997, this property was simply grass and people were allowed to keep their trailers there. I'm not sure, maybe Allison would know, it was zoned as residential, and I'm not sure when it stopped being residential and became marine industrial. Does anybody know
I'll take that as a question through to staff.
I'm sorry?
I'll take that as a question through to staff, Mr. Leggett.
Yes.
Through the mayor to our speaker, I'm sorry, I can't recall offhand if and when the zoning was changed from residential to the current zone. It was this since at least 2015. I can't speak to before then. Perhaps Mr. Humble might recall.
So at any rate, it wasn't years and years. I don't know when there was a container put there, but it certainly wasn't, to my recollection, it wasn't years and years ago. ignorance of the law is no excuse, especially for a corporation like Van Isle. They should know the bylaws, and it has been quoted, section 4.1, 2015, shipping containers shall not be permitted. I'm not sure why they didn't know that. They seem to just wish to do what they thought was important for their business without considering the residents. Now, Van Isle is a very well-run corporation. I had my boat there for many years and enjoyed it. However, and one of their statements is, "Your trust is our main concern." And I think they've let us down on that one. By putting containers in without checking the bylaws, it sort of is willy-nilly going to where you would like to go, rather than consider what's important for the town. Michael also talked about maybe 2 containers. Well, if you do that, then how many years would it be before there are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8? So I'm not sure that that is really feasible. It has been mentioned that in the original bylaw, a building was proposed rather than containers, and for some reason or other that wasn't built. I think that would also have to be looked into in terms of what is the building used for. At the moment, repairs are done outside without regard for time. Like any time is good to run a saw or a sander or whatever you're doing. And I think that also breaks a bylaw as well. The proposal changes not only the letter of the bylaw, but its intent. And if you look carefully, the intent, if I can find out where I quoted this, that it must be a quote, it must be a transition between marine industrial uses on Harbor Road and neighboring residential areas. So Michael has talked about not stacking one container on top of the other, and if you drive by the highway, you can see 3 containers stacked high, and that's roughly, what, 24 feet if they're 8 feet high. So what would stop them from stacking containers? There's nothing in their proposal. He says that, but is that in the actual proposal? The staff have done a comprehensive study of this whole question and have said no containers. And I think that's advisable. So I would ask Michael to rescind his proposal, take it back to Van Isle, rescind it that it's not in the interest of people who live in Sydney. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to staff.
Thank you. Just to correct my comment previously about when the property was zoned to allow for the boatyard use, at least since the year 2011, this zoning was in place with zoning bylaw 1660, and the use was permitted previous to that because a development permit was issued in 2009 to allow this use to happen.
Okay, thank you. Sir, please come forward. If you could please give us your name and address.
Sure, Your Honor. Mr. Mayor and councilors, my name is Randall Mang. I live at 10436 All Bay Road. So I'd just like to echo some of the concerns that John expressed, my neighbor. Primarily and chiefly, frankly, and perhaps let's start with the Van Isle operation itself, an extraordinarily run business, I think, obviously. They do a great job. It's a tidy operation. We all know that. My concern specifically is that we're talking about rezoning of this property itself and what that could represent in the future. And although it has been couched in language that it is to enable or legitimize the pre-existence of certain containers on the property, that once that zoning bylaw is changed, then who knows what is going to come down the pike. That in the future sale of a property to another industrial buyer, that they may see opportunity to use the property in a fashion in which Van Isle and its current owners may have not considered in this zoning application itself. So my request would be that if the issue is around a couple of shipping containers on the property and how are they being used, that perhaps that there is another mechanism that could perhaps enable Van Isle to achieve its objectives while also respecting our neighborhood, and that the people of All Bay Road and Sydney and surrounding communities should not be supporting the transformation of this property into a railway container yard, which is essentially what could be the risk that we would face, right? And there are obviously areas in Sydney proper where that is allowed, and we all know that when we drive up the Pat Bay Highway. So that's chief to my concern, is that it is a yacht park. That's its stated intention, and let's keep it that way as previously provided under the provisions of the law. Further to Van Isle's representative's remarks about things being stacked, shipping containers being stacked, I should note that in their current use, there are industrial materials being stacked on top of these containers. And I think that to some of my neighbors, and while it may not specifically affect my view, they're looking out their window at shipping containers that are piled to the height of that shipping container or higher right now in what appears to be boat floats or boat shed floats, as well as other, industrial paraphernalia that's stacked up against them and so forth. So when considering this application, I would also encourage council to consider the entirety of how those containers are being used, and not just within them, but on top of them. And right now, there's stuff piled all over them, or at least a number of them. Okay? So I think that expresses my points of view and my neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Noreen. I'm at 10438 All Bay Road. I'm very happy to see my neighbors here this evening, and I'm honored to be able to speak to the council and to the mayor. In regards to a couple of things that were said by Mr. McGregor and then followed up on, and I find them pretty egregious because, may I approach and show you some photographs?
We do have copies of those photographs. They were
Okay,
provided
but you
to
do
us.
not have the ones that I took from the sidewalk today. The very sanitized view of the shipping containers that is presented to you in the proposal is not the reality. The reality are shipping containers with pylons and flotation devices stacked upon the top, tripods, all kinds of things. I would like to approach and allow you to see
I
this.
think your description, ma'am, of your observations.
And directly behind this ramshackle pile of refuse and storage is the home of one of my neighbors whose bedroom window looks out on it. She provided me with a photograph of today of what she sees from her back deck, and I have circled it. It is the shipping container, so when Mr. McGregor says that they are not visible, that is incorrect. It's a falsehood. They are visible from residents' homes. They are visible from the street. Now, maybe more concerning to me, because I don't see them directly, there's a cedar hedge behind me, but is the quality of the environment since I've moved there that is the result of Van Isle's new boat parking lot. When I bought my property in 2005, there were stands of fir trees, cedar trees, open lots, and somewhat run down but small residential houses that were under rental. This was in 2005. Very shortly, within 4 years, as you know, in 2009 from the records, an agreement was given to them to create a boatyard, and the trees came down. The herons left, the Stellar jays were gone. It was very sad. The residents stood there in horror watching our neighborhood change. We used to be able to open the front door and open the back door and have lovely summer breezes coming through the house. And now, because of the pollutants in that boatyard, I no longer open the back. Sometimes I can't sit on my deck because the grinding and sanding in the boatyard that takes place on the hulls, and this is the anti-fouling paint that you know if you're a boater, is so toxic that the people who apply it wear what amounts to hazmat suits and ventilation masks. That this particulate is blowing into the trees and onto the grass so that now our neighbors don't feel that they can allow their grandchildren to play in their yards. And my organic garden that I once thought was organic is now probably polluted with this industrial dust coming across into our yards. Also, fiberglassing, solvents, a variety of air pollutants are being used as well. And there's one other thing, the noise pollution. We hear beep, 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 continuously as things are moved around in that yard. And as you know, as Health Canada tells us, that noise pollution causes stress, high blood pressure, and heart disease. So our health and well-being is now being challenged. And the last thing, of course, according to, proven by these photographs, is the visual pollution. Now, Van Isle runs a very clean business. It's sanitized, it's beautiful. It's like a park. They even put up Christmas lights for us in the neighborhood. But they have a dirty little secret. Pushed to the back of their boatyard are stacks of refuse and storage and these bins that should not be there. Why is it that they don't put them on the other side of the road, on the north side where it was originally? Why is it that they are pushing their garbage and their storage up against the homes of their neighbors? How can we be so disrespected and condemned to the degradation of our quality of life by this storage yard and an increase in the potential of having more containers with who knows what's in them? So I would like to ask you to reject this proposal because of all the good people on All Bay Road whose quality of life is so dear to them, that we want the clean air and we want the peace and quiet that our homes afford us. We do not want to have to be condemned to listening to noise pollution and breathing pollutants and whatever. And lastly, the value of our homes is being diminished. Who will buy, when it comes time to sell, a property who butts up against an industrial yard? Now, many of us have invested an enormous sum in the homes on All Bay. And I'm talking especially with the new ones that have been currently built or recently built. And those values of the new property owners will diminish profoundly. And I would ask you to consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak this evening? Yes, please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Rob Morris. I live on Harbor Road. I would like the council to take into consideration, from what I understood from the staff member who spoke, that shipping containers are not allowed in Sydney at all for storage use. They're only allowed for sale and resale or rental, but not to be used in Sydney. Is that correct, staff?
If I could take your question and put it through to staff, but for clarification, shipping, and I'll ask staff to confirm this or not, shipping containers, apart from the use we've discovered or heard earlier, that is on an industrial location, an industrial site in the West Sydney. They can be a business operating, storing shipping containers so that they can lease or sell them out to others who are using them elsewhere. A second permitted use for shipping containers is a temporary use for storage if building is commencing at the location. So it's for temporary storage. If staff could please speak to that.
Sure. Through the mayor to our speaker. Yes, section 414D of the zoning bylaw 2015 says just that shipping containers shall not be permitted, but nothing herein contained shall be deemed to prevent the temporary placement of a container on a lot for the storage of building materials stored temporarily for use in construction or of improvements with a valid building permit or development permit on the said lot. So storage of building materials in conjunction with a valid building permit.
Understood. Now, I just want people to take a moment to think about driving around Sydney. I know of a church that has had a storage container on their property for probably about 2 years. I know of a hotel in town, again, probably about a year and a half. Again, plenty of businesses at the end of the peninsula, on Harbor Road, throughout Sydney, you'll find shipping containers. So council would have to take into consideration that it's just not Van Isle. If an amendment to the shipping container bylaws don't change, then the community should expect to see all other businesses taken into consideration. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call for a third time if there's anyone wishing to address council.
My name's Bob McClure, and I live at number 9, 2235 Harbour Road. My wife and I have lived there for 16 years, and we've seen the development of Harbour Road from on our side, on the south side, from a boat-strewn, almost a garbage dump down the road, some houses, to what has now become a very, very creditable business with trees lining the road, boat storage, and so on. It wasn't until I received this letter from the town that I even realized that there was containers stored on this property that's under discussion this evening. And I walk up and down the road a lot, and I remember speaking to Councillor Rintoul before the election last year, saying to him, do not forget that Harbour Road is part of Sydney, because sometimes it tends to be considered elsewhere. So this, I think, is the opportunity for Council to really consider what is happening on Harbour Road. I concur with the previous speaker who said that I counted 9 containers, 6 large, 3 small, and 3 of the containers, the large ones, have all sorts of materials stored on top. On the other side of the All Bay side on Harbour Road, a building has been constructed at the time that the marina undertook repairs and changes. And it's a permanent building. And I don't think that there would be too many objections if the container volume storage is needed for the construction of a permanent building in that boatyard. I think Van Isle Marina is an excellent business. They've created a park on All Bay at the corner. that is well used. They have enhanced the street on both sides. They have retained a restaurant there. And when we have company visiting, we walk down there and praise what has happened on the road. What the other thing that has occurred is that other businesses on the street have followed suit, so that Harbour Road from 16 years ago becoming nice residential, semi-nice in marine industrial, to really a very nice walking street. So I think the container situation is something that council should look at very, very seriously and review. I think too what the previous speaker said, that it's not the only place in Sydney that has containers on its property, and maybe that should be under review. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Council. Introduce myself again. My name is Brendan Bell, owner of Prime Yacht Systems, a Victoria-based marine electrical and electronics business with an office in Victoria and a few containers here at Van Isle. So what we do is marine electrical electronics, as I said. On the electrical side, we do a lot of rewiring of boats, a lot of safety concerns. There's a lot of miswired boats out there that are in desperate need of being wired to our standards, which is ABYC. We see a lot of that on a day-to-day basis. And having the opportunity to kind of be close in the marina to other boats and stuff, you know, boats that we work on and bring up to standards is great. It's great to have all of our parts there. It's great to have tools there that we can use to work on them and whatnot. On the electronic side, currently a given project right now is we're working out with the Canadian Coast Guard on the new Bay-class vessels, doing all the navigation, because those boats were built in Ontario and some of the standards weren't applied again in some of the navigation stuff. So we're kind of sorting those out for the Canadian Coast Guard to provide safety on their end. So we're almost the first line in there, in you know, giving them a proper vessel to use to kind of go out and save lives and do what they do. The reasons for having proximity to marinas, you know, immediate response times to distressed mariners regarding electrical and navigation issues, as we discussed. Last year we had a customer in Van Isle that had an electrical fire with an outlet that had just seen too many ins and outs and created some arcing. That caused the fire department to come down, put out the fire, and then we actually came in and resolved the issue further from there, cleaned up the mess, and were able to clear up the electrical issues. Our success kind of comes from being mobile and be available and ready to go when necessary and have our resources close by. Having shipping containers nearby really goes a long way in us being able to do that. I think some of the benefits of having shipping containers is it kind of reduces the footprint on society, because we're actually recycling something that was brought to our shores because of our consumption of different things from China or wherever. The flexibility to be moved as a needed basis. So if you have a big enough job, say down or at the Coast Guard base or down at Point Hope, we can take the whole storage with our parts and everything and take it onto site and have it there readily available to do what we need to do. There's some instances of other communities using shipping containers in a really great way. If you go down to Victoria Inner Harbor, there's Redfish Bluefish there, a restaurant that utilizes shipping containers as the restaurant. I'm sure you've all eaten there, or some of you have eaten there. Another great brand new instance of a shipping container is actually out at Royal Bay Beach Park Playground, which is a new development out in Colwood. And it's right on the ocean there, part of a kids park. And they're using the shipping containers to kind of, I think, house some of their plumbing and electrical and stuff like that. But they've created beautiful murals on the side, and they're using it in a great forward-thinking way, recycling something that's already on our shores. Working with Van Isle has been excellent. As many of the other speakers have said, they're a great, well-organized company, and they've been more than welcoming to us as a company. But they were sure to to make sure that we knew that we could not stack the containers, that they had to be painted white and aesthetically look great, to kind of fit their whole marina there. As we know, they've created something that's great. I think, you know, it would go a long way if the community could just come together and meet outside of Town Hall and kind of, you know, have an open dialogue as to what they kind of expect Van Isle to do with their, you know, the things that are in their yard. Like, do they prefer Van Isle to empty the shipping containers and just stack their stuff up in the middle of a spot in the boatyard with no kind of consideration for at least kind of hiding it or putting it into a storage vessel? You know, I think Van Isle has its neighbors' best interests in mind. They created a beautiful dog park there, which, you know, they don't just allow their guests to go in there, they allow everybody, all the neighbors, to use it. As someone suggested, you know, they even decorate it for Christmas. I know apparently some people had some issues with the Christmas lights being taken down in March, but, you know, maybe that could be discussed if we just talked amongst ourselves instead of having to come to Town Hall and air our grievances. Pretty nervous. You know, what's our next move if we can't have shipping containers to continue to be kind of a mobile company that has stuff ready to go? You know, just maybe coming up with some sort of idea to have shipping containers on a barge or something. Maybe that's a better way to go, to have a barge in the marina with, you know, several shipping containers stacked on top of each other. Or it's a better idea just to have a barge anchored off here with dinghies ready to go so we can actively come in and work on boats as a needed basis. You know, we want to be part of the community, and we'd like to have an open dialogue to discuss, you know, the issues that some of the neighbors are having and whatnot. And maybe we could discuss, you know, certain guidelines that we're not allowed to stack containers, and you know, they have to be painted a certain way, which Van Isle is already doing and doing a great job at it. So we just ask to allow us to do our jobs in a safe and efficient way, and that's all I ask. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll ask for a third and final time if there are any speakers for this session of public participation. Seeing none, I will bring public participation to a close. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now move to approval of our agenda. Sorry. Sorry?
We didn't hear you back here.
I'm sorry? I called for a third time if there was any additional.
I couldn't hear you. May I stand up?
You most certainly may, ma'am. Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Yulita Fortune. I live on Eden Place, just off All Bay Road.
You might speak just a little closer to the microphone.
A little
ma'am.
closer, okay.
Thank you.
And I have a lot that backs on directly Van Isle's chain link fence. There is a container that has been there, I don't know how long, right there. I've had issues with that container. People working inside, sitting outside with a boom box. That happened twice. And it's very loud. I'm only about 15 feet from that container. And I live in a duplex, so we have a wide backyard. And Van Isle plans on their map show 6 containers that would be behind our property. There are also issues with people working with grinders, painting, and I can't blame it on the containers. But what happens there when the leaves fall off the trees, mainly I can see what's going on there. And I worry a little bit about these containers that are rented to people and the traffic going back and forth there. I think there's a lot of people coming into the yacht park, which is a misnomer because it is just a yacht parking place. There is not a direction, a bylaw that says what a yacht park is. I'd like that to be looked into. Well, so I've read everything, the reports. I've read the reports, and I think the staff's report was a very good one. They went through in the history that new people wouldn't know about, and I've been there for 24 years, so I've seen all these things that are mentioned. And I really would like the council to deny these requests for changes and for development permit. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call for a final time, and hopefully everyone can hear, for any last speakers. And seeing none, I will close public participation. Thank you again. I'd now like to move to approval of the agenda. I would like, sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a second presentation this evening. I'll just allow audience members, if they're wishing to leave before we continue. I'd now like to move to item C2, which is development permit application number DP 100790 for 2369 and 2373 Malaview Avenue to allow for the construction of 2 residential buildings, each containing 4 townhouse dwelling units. We have a presentation by Mr. Kyle Leggett of Java Designs, the applicant.
Sorry, it's Dallas Rudd that's doing the presentation.
Thank you, Dallas.
I'm the builder and developer. I'm a local here in Sydney.
And sorry, your name, sir? Dallas?
Dallas Rudd, R-U-U-D.
Thank you very much.
I've done a number of projects here in Sydney. I enjoy the seaside feel, and I do my best to create product that echoes that theme. There have been a number of clients here tonight in the earlier session here for homes that I've built on Eden and Albay, and they're very happy living there. Yeah, so here's the plans here. I propose to do 2 fourplexes, a total of 8 townhomes on Malaview. That's 2369 and 2373. You can see the building here. I think is there a little laser here, I think? Oh yeah, here we go. Oh, am I hitting you? Oh, it doesn't show on the TV screen. Anyway, that's fine. Here, this is Malaview up here. And you'll drive between the buildings and there'll be surface parking in the back. We're doing open concept. It's also, the price point is very affordable. It's a short walking distance to downtown Sydney. Again, we're doing, a seaside kind of theme with some shake detail and some board and batten. We're doing 2 different color schemes for each building, so it gives that, feel that it's a neighborhood feel and it's not just, a larger project. So when you drive by, It looks like 2 single-family homes from the street. Let's see if I can go down here to the bottom and show you the street view. So that's what it'll look like when you drive by, and you'll enter into the property here for all the cars to be parked in the back, so they won't be visible from the street. You can see all the shake detail, and yeah, it's going to be very quaint. Let me flip back here to the overview again. Lots of green space, landscaping. We're going to do all of the surface hardscapes will be interlocking brick. Yeah, and I do love the affordability of this project. I just finished a similar project in April, and we're about 50% sold on Rest Haven, 10490 Rest Haven. It's this similar with the 2 fourplexes on either side. We're almost 50% sold. And the demographics of the buyers in there so far are middle age, elderly, and we have a young family moving in. And so that's what this product, that's what we're going for, just opening up the demographics so we're not just specific to a certain age group. So this type of product will allow anyone to get into the market, and because it's affordable. Yeah. And I can here, let's see if I can get back to the file here. Go right out to the files, and I can show you. Yeah, so that's the current project that I just finished there on Rest Haven. So see how it looks like 2 single families almost when you drive by. And then I think I have. Oh, you have to go in here? Yeah, right here. There. Oh, there. Yeah, and so then that's the type of style we'll be doing, you know, wide open planks, open concept, white, bright, and open, cheerful for people. And I think that also. Yeah, and this is the project, 2 of the homes of the 6 homes I built on. Place here. Oh, the mouse. Oh, there, yeah. So just very, you know, coastal, Cape Cod, that type of feel is what we're after. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Rudd. I'll go to council members if they have any questions. Councillor Garnett and Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you for your presentation. Just, I think, 3 questions. The current occupants that live there, are the homes currently rented or owned? Do you know?
They are, yes. When we purchased them, we
Were they rented though, or are they owned? Like before you purchased them? Like I'm wondering if the people living there are renters or
they were owners that had owned those originally.
Okay.
Yes.
And you mentioned affordable. Can you give me an idea what the price point's going to be when you say affordable?
We're going to be, we're looking to be between $550 and $599 a door.
Okay.
So I believe around $500 you're getting a 1-bedroom apartment downtown Sydney. So this sort of gives you a townhome feel with an apartment type price point.
My last question, are you addressing anything in terms of any environmental upgrades, in terms of EV chargers? You mentioned the interlock brick, permeable, semi-permeable.
Yeah, semi-permeable.
Upping the step code maybe, windows that are better, insulation, just things like that, so it lessens the carbon footprint?
Well, we're currently building under the R2000, like homes that are the, I mean, my house, which I just built recently last year on All Bay, we were hitting 80 degrees just from the thermal heat intake. Like I didn't even turn my heat system on till December in that home, and it was off in February. So we're adhering to that same standard on these buildings that we're building. So they're super efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Yeah, I like it. Looks good, and we certainly need more homes in that price point. One question I had was about the accessible units. So happy to see that there's 2. That's great. I was just wondering about the parking spots for those 2. So what I noticed is that they're positioned in between 2 other parking spots, and they're the same width as the other parking spots. And so I'm just wondering whether they would be better placed maybe on the periphery so that they had more room to sort of get in and out, and whether that's a consideration.
Yeah, that's definitely a consideration. We can look at that once we get the parking lot laid out, and we're at that stage for sure.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Councillor Fallon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Rudd, for your presentation. I've got a couple of practical applications of the units themselves. And one is, if you can clarify for me, now on the accessible units, we're looking at 1,000 square feet on 2 floors. And while I appreciate there's a lift and a staircase, given we're just under 500 square feet on the main floor, and I'm sort of looking at the amount of real estate that's being taken up with the lift and the staircase, would a stair chair, what the heck are they called? You know, the chairs that, that go up, as opposed to the lift. I'm just looking at the use of space.
Yeah, that could be a possible option. I mean, it would be up to the end user purchasing it, which they would prefer as far as a lift or the chair that goes up.
Are you wiring and building structurally the shell, the tunnel for the lift? Are you pre-building this in?
It would be easily to implement once everything is built. Okay. As far as modifying the floor joist to allow for that shaft. Typically, people buying in this price point to put in a lift, it would be tens of thousands of dollars. So,
well, and that's sort of, and I'm looking at the amount of real estate that's being taken up for this space as a chairlift. That's the word I'm looking for. I can do it. As opposed to putting a chairlift, if that's a better use of the space. And the other one that I have is, because we're looking at small space and storage is a big prime thing that we always hear from people is storage. In the floor plans, I noticed that the units, the closet space backs up onto the stairwell, and the stairwell on the one side has got a stacking washer and dryer, and the other is the stair. Is to leave an opening, to ensure that there is an opening from the closet into the stairwell so that they can access that.
You're exactly right. Those type of details are hard to show on a plan, but once we're at framing stage, then all of those door access points will be put in at that time.
I want to ensure that that isn't lost space then, that that it's built in close. And I mean, I realize someone can break into it afterwards and put an access door in there, but it would be nice if right from square one that you're looking at that there is access to storage.
We're actually seeing that from people going through the current project on Rest Haven. Everyone is enjoying the crawl space for storage and the access that we've created for them. And so we would look to implement the same type of storage options for them on this project.
Okay. The one other point that I have, given, again, I'll specify, because this is a small unit, these are small units, you're 1,000 square feet on 2 floors, is swing doors take up real estate space again. And I realize that they're less expensive than doing pocket and bypass. But if you thought about using more pocket doors and bypass doors, simply that you don't have the swing door opening up. I noticed on the 2nd floor in a couple of places, I sort of think that you can still put a storage container, an armoire or something behind a door if it's a pocket door as opposed to a swing door.
As a builder, I'm always concerned about doors and things, as you can imagine. And typically the standard of building is moving away from bifold doors because of the way that all the mechanics of it, and they kind of can break down. People typically aren't wanting a bifold door, but we would look at options if it enhanced the livability within those smaller spaces to apply that. I know that I looked at putting that in between the master and the ensuite, but when you're sharing a bathroom with a bedroom down the hall, and then you just have a bifold, you don't get the same amount
not bifold, I'm talking...
Or sorry, pocket door
in this
there.
one it would be a pocket
Yeah, that's
door.
right. You would get the same amount of privacy with a pocket door
Really?
and somebody else using it. Sound just comes through those doors a lot easier than they would a regular closing door in a door frame. And then also, you know, you want to try and avoid pocket doors as much as possible because of the wear and tear and how they last over the years, you know, with all the wheels and the mechanisms inside the walls. But absolutely, where it would make sense, we would implement pocket doors and bifolds, for sure.
Okay.
Because it's about, you know, the end user being happy. Everybody comes through in the open houses, they inspect all that stuff. And so obviously we want these units to be attractable to the end user to ultimately sell them.
Okay, thank you. Those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone else? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I guess I had a question that kind of follows a bit from Councillor Fallett's questions about adaptability. One thing I hear from people is just kind of the mourning of the loss of the good old Sydney one-floor ranchers. For even people who, you know, they're not needing a wheelchair yet or a walker, but they're kind of not looking at, they see the townhouses and they think, stairs. As someone who's building a lot of these, obviously, what is the reason for doing all up down? Is there any potential to be able to do units that are bottom floor and top floor divided? So that even the top floor maybe has a stair outside to get down to a yard space, but still they're all on one level. And so it's a little more adaptable before they need to be adaptable.
Yeah, we looked at every option possible, doing scenarios with ranchers or mixed. But the trouble is with ranchers, they need such a large footprint to make sense. And I built a lot of ranchers, so I know what's involved, again, to make it work where you have room for doors and access to things in that livable space. And so you need such a tremendous amount of property to be able to accommodate that type of application. And we really took time and prided ourselves on this project to avoid any type of variances, to be able to do the product that we've done here. So we're like already, you know, in reference to you saying how small it is, the units on Rest Haven, that picture I showed you, it's master on the main. So the main living area, because we've moved the bedroom upstairs and because it's open, is going to be quite a nice free-flowing, almost even better than my project on Rest Haven for the main living area. The only difference is all the bedrooms are upstairs. Keep in mind there is a huge amount of population in the older age brackets. They do live in homes that have stairs as well. So there is a market for, you know, the elderly that would want a two-story home. Not every person that's older wants to live in a rancher. Some people prefer that too, right?
I was thinking not actually building, you know, 4 ranchers on each site,
okay.
but having 4 units that are divided. You know, the whole unit is all on one floor. So rather than having 4, each of them being up down, there's 4. 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top that are all on one.
Oh, I see.
And that might have the same issue. I don't know, but
the trouble with that type of product is people don't typically like having people living above them. And we also looked at that scenario as well, right? People walking on, it's like now you're in a basement suite kind of a feel for someone buying that unit. So we steered away from that because the marketability of that, you know, with the cost of building today, we wouldn't be able to make any money on that project.
Thank you.
So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rudd,
All right.
for your presentation. We'll
Thank
be
you.
considering the application further in the agenda. Now I'd like to move to approval of our agenda. We have two amendments or possible amendments. The first is Councillor Duncan would like to raise item 1616 from correspondence, and we can move that to new business. And I would like to council to consider moving item 14A, which is near the end of our agenda, to item 3B.
I'll move adoption of the agenda as amended.
Second.
Comment, call a question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And we have the adoption of our minutes from the regular council meeting of July 8th.
Move adoption.
Second.
Call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So we now will move to item 14A. Which is bylaw number 2174, the zoning amendment number 38, to allow the retail sale of recreational cannabis in parts of Sydney's downtown commercial C1 zone and permit the processing and manufacturing of cannabis products in Sydney's industrial M1 zone in the Sydney Business Park. We have a report dated August 6th from staff.
Well, I'll move that report be received for information.
Second.
Okay, I don't think we need to receive the report for information.
Okay. I'm just following.
We have it first and seconded. I'll call a question. Those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'll move that pursuant to public hearing and receipt of approval from MOTI that the bylaw be given third reading.
Second?
So I should mention, we have held a public hearing and we do have receipt of approval from MOTI, which is included in our agenda package. Discussion on third reading. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, to clarify, if I may, under this item, I would like the opportunity, again, to readdress the issue of Beacon Avenue being included in the excluded area. And as such, I would like to move an amendment to the bylaw at this point.
Do we have a seconder?
I would second that.
Discussion? Councillor Wainwright.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. That's, I would perceive that to be a hostile amendment to the motion that I just put forward. So if the motion I put forward is defeated, then I'd encourage my colleagues to consider an amended motion. But I put the motion forward and I would like to proceed with the motion that was put forward.
I see merit in that, and I would ask the mover and seconder if they would table or withdraw their, or if they would withdraw their motion. We can have consideration of whether you're in favor of third reading or not, and have discussion on that. And if the motion were to fail, we could proceed with an amendment at that time.
Yeah, I didn't move it or second it. I'm just looking to readdress the issue of excluding Beacon Avenue from this bylaw.
Okay, sorry, I did take Councillor O'Keefe's as a seconder. So,
beg your pardon.
Okay.
Then yes. In which case we have mover and seconder. Yes.
So if you would withdraw, then we can proceed with third reading. If third reading fails, then we can consider an amendment to. So we can speak to the issues of that may be under consideration in the amendment during discussion of third reading, which may then lead to the defeat of the motion and then go back.
Yeah, understood.
To the amendment. Okay, so we do have a mover and seconder for third reading, and I will now open discussion on third reading. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess my view is we've already had quite a bit of discussion of all the points that have come up in the public hearing and also during the correspondence. I'm not really perceiving that there's anything new that's being brought forward. So I think it would be efficient for us to move on to actually making the decision. And if the motion fails, then that actually is a decision. With respect to the procedural stuff about the amendment that was proposed, when I mentioned that it was a hostile amendment, what I was really meaning is that it's out of order and shouldn't have been tabled. But since it's been withdrawn, that's fine. I just wanted to kind of make the point about procedure. And I see some nods from our parliamentarians, so I'll leave it at that.
A question on, or sorry, I'll seek clarification from staff on procedure. If third reading was to be defeated and we wish to entertain an amendment, we would have to rescind second reading and then consider the amendment. So that is permissible, if I am correct in that. But let's please consider continued discussion of third reading. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do want to thank those who participated and took the opportunity this evening to speak with respect to this item. And I want to thank those who took the time to write letters and provide feedback to council. It's greatly appreciated. I do feel somewhat concerned that perhaps council, myself obviously included in this statement, should have looked at trying to engage the community at another time of year. And I realize this is on the docket to be addressed, but I do feel that July and August we see a community that's part absent due to vacations and somewhat disconnected. So I'm not convinced we had as fulsome an amount of feedback had we been able to go through this endeavor perhaps in early fall. So I'm concerned about that, and I guess I apologize for not having thought of that as we were moving this forward. But again, very pleased with the feedback. I'm not sure I'm completely aligned with Councillor Wainwright's statement that he didn't see a lot of new information. I found personally the report from Island Health to offer some other items for some consideration with respect to this matter. And as I've noted on previous occasions, fundamentally, I have some concern with Beacon and the nature of the retail climate on Beacon as being an appropriate venue for the selling of recreational cannabis. And I say that because this council doesn't have the latitude to decide necessarily which business is going to open next to the cannabis store. We don't have that lens to the future to know whether or not there's going to be a new children's store open and its location is restricted, perhaps due to the fact that there's a cannabis retail store on our main street. I'm fundamentally uncomfortable with proceeding with the inclusion of Beacon, and as such I won't support the bylaw as in its current form. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan, and then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm generally in agreement with Councillor Wainwright that I don't believe I heard new information. I felt there are still a lot of misunderstandings about what legalization means, what the product is, and what the existing bylaw is. Many of the concerns are things that are already addressed within it, and other things are completely outside of our role as regulators and have to do with sincerely held religious or moral beliefs that are not backed up by the science, and so I can't really admit of those. The one thing that I did vacillate on when I was trying to decide about the inclusion of Beacon was the main issue for me was partly the active storefront issue, which of course is concerning to everybody, and what staff, Mr. Newman had brought up before, when the idea that this might affect the rent in the town and inadvertently through secondhand drive out other businesses. That one still concerns me, whereas the first one does not. We still have the requirement for them to be an active storefront, and if a business can come up with a creative way to do that, then they can do it. And if they can't, then they can't be on Beacon. Everyone still gets evaluated. But while I was downtown this weekend, I noticed we have a vape shop that would have an address on Beacon. It's on the second story. It's right across from Beacon Park. Beacon Park, that's where I could see it from. They sell smokable products, which many are probably allergic to. If you're allergic to marijuana smoke, you're allergic to cigarette smoke, you're allergic to what comes out of vapes. And so I don't want to set up something that is a moral distinction that has nothing to do with actual physical distinctions in the products. We have a Victoria distillery that's right in the main area. It may not be on Beacon, but it's still a main address. I buy products for my family there all the time. I am a recreational booze drinker. I go out and I have beer sometimes with my food. I could probably do that at a dozen different restaurants, and I can buy alcohol from 4 different outlets. So I don't feel that is a valid distinction, and 3 of those outlets are on Beacon. So for me, or the idea that one day, maybe, potentially, possibly, a different business that other people would like more would move in next door, and now they can't, they'll have to go down another block. I can't predict the future, and I don't feel it's fair to try and restrict something now because maybe, potentially, something unforeseen could happen later. I have to deal with what we have now. And so for that reason, I still feel comfortable allowing them on Beacon. I guess the second location I was thinking of was the corner of 5th, the Driftwood Plaza there. That would have a Beacon address, but it is set back from the street. There's a parking lot in front. That is not an active storefront in terms of pedestrians, right? Because there's a parking lot in the way. Safeway is on Beacon. There's a giant parking lot and a brick wall in between. That's part of the reason we have problems with businesses on that side of Beacon, is because we have a giant inactive storefront. So I feel like putting a small business up to a higher standard than we have for these existing businesses with their parking areas out front is unfair. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm generally in agreement with allowing retail cannabis, but I have some reservations. I know, the comment's been made that we've discussed a lot of this, no new information. However, I think part of our role also is in terms of education, and through the feedback that we got from residents tonight and in emails and on social media. There's just, a few things that I wanted to comment on. And, one thing for me is that cannabis in our community is not something new. So for those who have concerns about cannabis coming to Sydney, it's been here for decades. We just haven't seen it because there's no public place to access it. There's concerns about, the levels of THC, or that things might get put into it, that sort of thing. And I think, the point to recognize is that one of the reasons of going towards legalizing it and making it available is so that people who choose to use it have a safe place to get it. In terms of concern about how it's going to impact Beacon in terms of lineups, in terms of people smoking up on the street or in the neighborhood, I don't think that's going to happen. The reason is I did go do some research at a place downtown that sells it, and I just hung out in the parking lot for an afternoon just to watch. I didn't sample anything. But no, I just wanted to get an idea of what these things were like, who was going there, what was happening in that in that particular business area, and it was very innocuous. Like, you couldn't even tell that it was a cannabis store. There was nothing to identify it as such. People walked in, they pulled up, they walked in, they came in a few minutes later with a plain white paper bag. They got in their cars and they drove off. So there was no people smoking up in the parking lot, or it didn't seem to be disruptive at all. So I think that's going to be okay. The things that I do still have reservations, though, is about having it on Beacon, and that's for a couple reasons. So first of all is in terms of our downtown local area plan. So it says in there that we want to have a strong focus on having a positive experience for pedestrians. So having cannabis stores with blank facades facing the street would not contribute to street interest, activity, and a general positive pedestrian experience for Sydney. So just in terms of our OCP and our local area plan, I don't support it for that reason. The other reason is, despite the fact that, yes, there's liquor stores on Beacon or in other areas and smoke shops, I guess what I think is we shouldn't look at the worst examples or worst practices that are already in existence. In moving forward, when we have information from health authorities and other areas that say, here are certain risks, we know this right now going forward, that Island Health has says we have a duty to mitigate the exposure to youth. In their memo, they comment about making sure that retail cannabis stores are not, on the route to school, or I would presume from that, not just the route to school, but in areas where families or children would frequent. And so when I think about Beacon is our main drag, where we have a lot of family events. We have our Christmas parade, we have our Canada Day celebrations, we have our Thursday night markets. We have lots of family activities that take place on Beacon. And so I don't think, for that reason, and because it doesn't support what's in our downtown local area plan, that we should be supporting it on Beacon. There's lots of other places on the side roads that they can set up, but so for that reason, I wouldn't be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Fallett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate all the points that my fellow councillors have brought up, and I had dinner with Councillor O'Keefe on Saturday night, and we had some chats about this, and the Beacon Avenue, and what it represents as far as a family and families and the children that are there and what they're seeing. And in thinking about all of this, we can take a whole lot of care and say we're going to put something here or there or someplace else. I don't know in the end if that is going to make a difference by saying we're not going to have it on Beacon Avenue because of the exposure for what children are seeing. They can be walking down 3rd Street and walking past the shop there. Is Beacon Avenue busier, more kids walking past? I guess so. We have riders that commented that it shouldn't be in buildings with residents on top, because we don't want that proximity, because there's families there. I don't know how far we go to try to mitigate something. It's a legal substance, so I'm not going to go on with that. It's a business. We've got some businesses already that that choose to blank out their walls, their windows on Beacon Avenue, and some are, such as the tobacconist is supposed to do it. Another one, that's a corporate thing. I don't like it. I think it would be, I like looking into the shops and seeing what's there. I appreciate the shop owners who are diligent about changing their window display on even a weekly basis. I think it's a great way to showcase what you've got available and finding out what I didn't know I needed. Should cannabis be on Beacon Avenue? I guess I could go either way with it. But I'm not overly convinced that that is something we need to do. Every application that's coming to us to open up our cannabis store is going to have to come to us for perusal. So I think if there is something that we see that isn't working for us, we have the right to turn it down. And so I'm prepared to support the bylaw where it is now. Thank you.
Councillor getting to be a long evening already.
Yeah, that's okay.
I was going to say Councillor Wainwright, but we'll let you go first.
Thanks. I just also want to echo Councillor Rintoul, the appreciation for people coming out to speak on the topic, to write letters, emails, social media, and those who approach me to talk to me about it. It's great when the community gets involved in decision making, and that's kind of what I think most of us were wanting to have happen when we decided to run for council and in the mayor's position. So thank you very much. It's much appreciated. Yeah, I echo what Councillor Fallett said. We've structured it so that we have control over where we can have these establishments set up. We have a final say. You will have another say when an application comes forward. At public participation, you can come and let us know whether you think that's an appropriate place for one to be opening up. And so I like the fact that that's in there and gives us that sort of control. I'm a little concerned about the whole idea about shuffling these legitimate businesses selling legal products off to the dark recesses of the side streets somewhere, like they have to hide because it's kind of like, you know, the old way of thinking, and that it's a legal product and they have the right to sell it. And I don't want to treat them any different than I treat any other business application. I think, you know, if they present a good case, then we should look at each one on its own merits and not have to have that whole thing that's been sort of hovering over this product for so long. For me, it all comes down to the fact that it's legal, and if it's legal in terms of the highest courts on the land and everywhere else is decided, then I don't feel like I should stand in the way. And I do appreciate people's concerns that they've raised, but I think that the benefits will outweigh those, and I will support the motion as it sits. Thank you.
Councillor Wainwright, and then I might speak for a first time and go into second speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not going to go through kind of a lengthy repeat of the merits of allowing retail cannabis in Sydney. The issue that seems to be getting discussed is simply this one about is it okay on Beacon? And the storefronts are highly regulated by the provincial rules, and we have a set of development permit guidelines that apply to all storefronts on Beacon, obviously with the provincial requirements having to be met. There's concern expressed about exposure to children, and I honestly cannot imagine a location in our downtown core that doesn't have children exposed to it. So maybe we should relegate this to a side street and put up some signs saying no children allowed on this street, but I don't think we want to go there. As far as the nature of the exposure, you're going to have a storefront that doesn't allow them to see the product. They're not allowed to advertise the product on the storefront. They can have a name, and basically it's not allowed to be able to see inside. So it'll be challenging for them to make that look nice, but if they can't do a decent job of it, we actually have the ability to simply reject the application when it comes forward. We don't have to have any reasons whatsoever. We can just say, sorry, it's a Monday. You know, we don't accept these things on Mondays. But as far as the exposure, you're going to have people going into the store, they're going to buy a product, and they're going to bring it out in some kind of bag. Probably not reusable plastic, but I really have no expectation that people are going to be ripping the package open as they come out the door going, look what I got, look what I got, or otherwise making a big deal of it. I think probably most children are just going to see some people coming out of a store with a bag, and I appreciate that some people have really strong views about this, but I'm just having trouble. I just don't share that view, so I'm happy to support it as is.
Okay, I would like to add my comments after 6 councillors speaking. I won't be supporting the third reading. I share many of the views that Councillor Rintoul and Councillor O'Keefe have put forward. It's not a moralistic or a comparison with other products. It is in an active storefront. I've done business on Beacon Avenue for the last 18 years. I think having the most vibrant possible main street in our community is important to both residents and visitors. In an active storefront, when we have the choice of having an inactive storefront or not, I think the right decision is to have an inactive storefront elsewhere in the community. So it's not about what the products are, it's about what It's the fact that it's an active storefront. I will call attention to what is new information. The letter received July 31st from the two medical officers from Southern Vancouver Island. We did previously receive a letter from the Chief Medical Officer for Vancouver Island and the other all medical officers on the island. And they have indicated, as we have seen in the staff report, they are recommending a separation of 300 meters, preferably 600 meters, between cannabis retailers, schools, recreation centers, other locations that children and youth frequent. And as indicated in the staff report, if you applied it strictly, we would not have a cannabis location in the downtown between the highway and the waterfront in our business district. However, it is a legal substance. I believe, as the medical officers have indicated in the letter, that small communities will have more of a challenge in selecting locations. The side street rents are significantly lower than the main street rents for a reason. They have much less traffic. And our main street has a children's clothing store. It has Buddy's Toys. It has a children's bookshop. It has many other places where children go. And I respect the chief medical or the medical officers in their view that we should try and mitigate the exposure. But quite frankly, it comes down to an inactive storefront. We have the choice. I believe a cannabis location on a side street or Bevan will be just as successful. People will seek the product out, and they will do it at lower rents. So I don't support the motion. I'll now go to speakers for a second time, Councillor Rintoul and Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I concur with your comments around the active storefront, certainly, and that I don't think we're taking anything away from this opportunity for retailers if this premise is not allowed on Beacon, certainly. I'll just speak very briefly. Yes, we've heard repeatedly it's legal in Canada, but we have the opportunity as a community to decide how we regulate it. And I think we normalize it. I think it's referenced certainly in the report from Island Health, that these premises, we have an opportunity here to support risk reduction, destigmatization, but without normalizing or promoting, particularly in the area where children can frequent. And I think the mayor did a very good job of articulating where we already have a number of children's retail shops on Beacon, and I noted earlier that we don't have a crystal ball to see what shop comes next on Beacon. Yes, we have the means to regulate and to adjudicate on applications moving forward, but why open the door on Beacon to begin with if we truly have a concern about that presence on Beacon? I do, and I'll reiterate that I won't be supporting the bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So just one thing I want to comment on is that, a comment was made that this is just like any other business. It's legal, and so we shouldn't be sort of putting barriers in the way. But I just want to reiterate that this is not like any other business. It is not. Yes, it's legal. However, it's not like any other business. If it was like any other business, the provincial government, the federal government, would not have such restrictions about how they have to have their storefront, how they have to operate, all of the security checks that they have to go through. It's quite a different beast. And, I don't think we're talking about, we're going to mark off streets where no kids are allowed. I mean, of course, that's not realistic. But I think the point, like Councillor Rintoul and the mayor talked about, it's about if we have the opportunity to mitigate the normalization of something that health officials have clearly stated to us that these are risks, that why wouldn't we take that opportunity to do that? And so for those reasons, along with others, I stick with not supporting the motion.
Councillor Duncan, then Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind perhaps council and for anyone who is in the audience who has not read the full bylaw that in the application procedure that is attached to this bylaw, part of the staff report for every single application that comes through will require having to talk about impacts to the community, the location, the person capacity, the impact of noise, adherence of the storefront and exterior building modifications and signage, proximity to sensitive sites, and existing cannabis retail stores. So that will always be considered. There is no situation where a future council, just because it's on Beacon, is going to say, oh, sure, it can go next to Lulu's, it's allowed to be on Beacon. That would be in the staff report and considered for every site. I'm just wondering, and it is a moral issue, it is emphatically a moral issue, because I am absolutely certain that the town hall was not packed by people saying it shouldn't be on Beacon because children are there, when Victoria's Distillery opened up a distillery and a retail sales facility immediately next to the aquarium and Beacon Park. Okay, there are 2 restaurants that serve alcohol on open patios immediately next to the parks, and I am dead certain the town hall was not packed with people opposing children being exposed to that. I am dead certain people were not worried about the beer garden that is immediately across the street from where Lulu's is opening up during the car show this weekend, where children were at, including mine. I have no problem with children being adjacent to adults buying substances they're allowed to. My children know adults consume alcohol. They see us consume it and consume it responsibly. As long as my children are seeing people consuming it responsibly, then hopefully they will grow up to know that that's how drugs and alcohol are dealt with. Thanks.
Councilor Gurnett.
I can't help but think that these same discussions were held many decades ago by councils with regards to opening liquor sales and cigarette sales. And here we are. They're here, and I will steadfastly stand by the fact that alcohol and tobacco has killed and damaged more lives in the world than marijuana has. And if we're allowed to sell those products with all the damage they've caused, mentally, psychologically, and every other way, ripping families apart, I mean, really, I mean, seriously, I don't see this being, I mean, I'm maybe stretching to far lengths here, but I'm sure this discussion was had when liquor sales were first brought. I mean, it would have divided a community. Cigarette sales, all that stuff is bad for us. Health Canada tells us those things too. People are allowed to consume them. It's a legal product. Children can't go into the store. Like they can go into a liquor store with their parents because they're not going to purchase, but I don't think they're going to be allowed to go into this store. So I don't think they're going to be that exposed to it. So I echo a lot of the same sentiments that Councillor Duncan was saying. I was at the car show yesterday, and there was an open beer garden, and people had their kids in there buying food. And there's liquor right there. So I mean, it's a tough one, I know, for a lot of people to look at, but it's something I'm comfortable supporting, and I think I really do think it's going to be for the benefit of our community. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question on 3rd reading. All those in favor? Those opposed? We have 3 opposed. The motion carries. Thank you.
I'll move that the bylaw be adopted.
Second.
Discussion. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? We have 3 opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move to, let me get back into my agenda here. We are now moving to item 4A. We have a business not completed at a previous regular meeting. 4A is a request for a letter of support for a proposal for a multi-use trail development. At a previous council meeting, we denied the request and we passed a motion requesting additional information. We have received that information and we have a recommendation from staff.
I'll move the recommendation of the town provide a letter of support.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Those opposed, the motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We have no business arising. We have no delegations, no petitions. Number 8 is the mayor's report. In the interest of time, I will withhold comments of my involvement in the community and otherwise until the September meeting. I do want to make a comment, which I did wish to make at the end of the cannabis discussion, or bylaw discussion, and that was to thank. We did not mention that there was 24 letters received from residents, and we appreciated receiving those comments, and certainly the individuals who spoke this evening. I do wish to apologize concur in Councillor Rentoul's observation about the timing with regards to engagement, but another apology I wish to make is with regards to Town Talk. While this council, working with staff, did more engagement for a public hearing than has been done previously, and Mr. Humble spoke to those additional requirements apart from posting notice. One of the things that we embarked on was to include a substantial piece on this cannabis bylaw in our quarterly Town Talk report, which will go out to thousands of residents. It is something that went to the printer quite some time ago, and we anticipated that it would have been received by residents within the last several days for them to consider as additional communication. And unfortunately, with timing, with Canada Post, that Town Talk will not go out until begin going out until today. And I regret that occurrence. We will be as diligent as we can be in the future with regards to communication on future public hearings in that medium of communication. I don't believe we have any council reports this evening. I'll move to committee reports. Excuse me, we have no committee reports. I'll move to staff reports. We have item 11A, which is the zoning amendment application number RZ00101 and development permit application number DP100794 for the addresses combined on Harbour Road to allow shipping container as a permitted use under the Marine Industrial Zone W1.2 in order to legalize the existing 9 shipping containers on the property. We have a report dated from staff dated July 31st. And Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the staff recommendation is to deny the zoning amendment application and the development permit application. And I confess that I am not comfortable with simply rejecting it. Now, I recognize that there are a lot of concerns that are being raised, and I think that there should be a way for us to address those concerns without outright denying the application. So, for example, the number of shipping containers is certainly something we could specify in a zoning bylaw, and we probably could do something about height of things stored on top and a variety of other issues. And I don't know exactly what I would want to propose at the moment in that regard, but what I would like to do is move that we refer this to staff with looking for some recommendations of how we could accommodate the existing use of shipping containers and address the various concerns that are being raised. And I recognize this will come, if that motion is approved, it may eventually wind up in a public hearing. I think there will be a lot of opportunity for the neighborhood to comment, but I don't feel comfortable cutting it off at this point, particularly when we didn't have Philbrooks represented, and they are a major employer in the area. So I'm not sure if staff caught my motion, but I'd be looking for a second.
Second.
Thank you.
So we have a motion to refer to staff to continue to enter into discussions with the proponent. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm comfortable with the suggestion in part because, as one of the speakers noted, and as many of us are acutely aware of, Sea cans are not unique to this property in terms of being used as storage appliances around Sydney. I think there's an opportunity for Van Isle here, which I acknowledged earlier as a community leader, an involved company with a local family history that I think we should be proud of. And you've got an opportunity, I think, as this is addressed, to work through some concerns that neighbors have, because clearly there are concerns. And I would not at all appreciate if there was no respect given to noise pollution, as an example. It wouldn't take much to improve screening along that fence line. And I think if Van Isle continues to act as they have corporately in the community and starts to revisit the rapport in the community locally to those residents, and really makes an effort to address that, it would go a long way, I believe, to resolving some of the larger issues that weren't necessarily germane to storage containers that were brought out tonight. So with all due respect, I would make that comment. And I'm very comfortable with the motion as it's put forward, because I don't see us cutting off people's livelihoods at any point in relation to being able to provide a service that's valued in the local economy. Thank you.
Councillor Fallett, then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm happy that Councillor Wainwright made that motion, because I was not prepared to do an outright deny of the application. I see there's merits of having sea cans, and I think we need to have some parameters around it. Obviously, if the sea cans are being used as storage throughout our town at different times in different places, that's something that we need to take a look at. Time is also moving on. There's different innovations, and I think there's a difference between what old rail cars and shipping containers look like and what purpose-built shipping containers such as Van Isle and others are using. Having said that, there were obviously some concerns that were raised by the neighbors that has nothing to do with the sea cans, but I think that needs to be addressed. I also believe that Van Isle will continue to be a good corporate citizen and a good corporate neighbor. I have a sense that they would be willing to work on it. If there are bylaw infractions on other things that have been happening, those are things that can be dealt with. One thing I don't like is when people come after the fact and say, oops, we've done this, and see, we shouldn't. However that came to be, here it is. I think it's an opportunity for us as a municipality to take a look at the sea cans and how they're being used, and it seems to be something that is going to be part of where we are. I also see that there's some flexibility for a business to have this as opposed to putting up a standalone building. The cost factor in that, and also the fact that it is then stationary. This has some flexibility that it can be moved if something changes. I think there's significant employees involved in this, and I'm happy that we are going to I'm happy that we're proposing to send this to staff to come back with a report and have us take a look at and see how we can make this work in the best interest of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the motion to take a look at how we can make these containers work in the community. I guess it's a tough thing, this particular area, because it's residential and industrial living side by side. It's kind of a buffer zone. So I'm very sympathetic to the concerns expressed by the residents that showed up. Especially the grinding and the toxic material in the air, the noise and those sorts of things. Those are nuisance issues and noise issues that should be dealt with, but not specifically related to the issue of the containers. Having said that, as previously mentioned, issues with them being stacked up with stuff and being unsightly, and I'm sure those sorts of things could be addressed. I guess, and it's an important industry going on down there, lots of jobs. There's not really any space for them to expand too much. We're limited, so those containers seem to be a good option. And they are being used throughout our community. So I guess what I'd be interested in is when we're looking at this, you know, whether we're gonna look at it just for this particular area, or for the whole society. Our Mary Winspear Center, who we support, has got a great big one sitting, I think, still in their property. Churches have them. So I guess, you know, if we're going to look at this and we're going to target Harbor Road, as one of the speakers spoke, we should be looking at it for everybody and putting some guidelines in place overall, I think, for Sydney in terms of what's the deal going to be with containers. Thanks.
Councillor Gardner?
Yeah, I think Councillor Wainwright's suggestion is a sensible one. I feel also for the people who live in that neighborhood. I can imagine that's quite a horrible thing to have to go through. But it's not germane to whether these actual storage containers are going to be on the site. But certainly, how stuff piled on top of it, that for sure is germane to all of it. I do commend them on the fencing and the hedging. I have to be honest. I drove down there, and until I got to a telephone pole, I couldn't even see the storage containers. It's that part of it's been well done, but I can see the concerns that people have on the backside. So I think if we can come to some kind of compromise and alleviate their concerns, and it works for everybody, that's the path we should take. So, thank you.
I'll just add briefly that I concur with many of the remarks already made. We do have a long-time company who's been a good corporate citizen and done many good things in the community. If we go back to when the development permit was approved for this park on the north side of Harbour Road, we have the plans before us, and what was approved was the open area for the repair and maintenance or storage of boats. There was a smaller building built, which is currently, I think, about 2,000 square feet or meters. It's in the front corner. But then a 18,000 square foot building was proposed and approved, and that was to include repair and maintenance and storage activities. And I think, I'm not sure what changed in the proponent's mind at the time, but they made a decision not to construct that building and over time commence with shipping containers, certainly not 18,000 square feet of them, but for certain aspects of their business. The unintended consequence was that the repairs and maintenance are conducted outdoors rather than indoors, and we've heard some of the impacts on the residents. However, I know Van Isle and other marine businesses on Harbour Road are fully aware of the WorkSafe BC requirements for their operations, and I believe that they are likely to be in compliance, or it would have been raised by now. And so I would like to see a solution to this. A concern is we did have clarification with regards to sea cans not being permitted as a permanent structure on industrial or marine industrial sites. We do have the option to a zoning amendment if it carries on through discussions for this particular zone, which is just marine industrial, and not to do it. But I suspect that if we do approve it for marine industrial, we will soon have other industrial locations seeking to have sea cans in use on their properties. And I suspect that they don't have the screening in place that Van Isle currently has for its surrounding properties. And I think that's something we need to consider in terms of setting a precedent. I have received requests personally since taking office from a number of businesses including a furniture store in downtown Sydney, who would like a C-can in their parking lot. They have room for it. It will not impact their parking requirements because they don't want to move furniture from an off-site storage area. They would sooner have a C-can. So there is no question that there are beneficial uses to C-cans, but there have been concerns over the aesthetics of them. But I now want to turn to something that we really haven't discussed this evening, and that is in the staff report. And the way this whole matter arose and has come before council is because of a fire inspection that occurred, I believe, last September, an annual fire inspection. And while that fire inspection passed the inspection and fire extinguishers and so on were dealt with, our fire department did pass on to our bylaw enforcement department that there was a concern, and I'll read from the staff report that the storage of materials in shipping containers is more hazardous than in conventionally constructed accessory buildings due to the airtight nature of containers. Fire department staff have concerns with the safety of storing materials related to boat maintenance and repair in shipping containers. And it continues. And I think that was why this matter has come before us, because the fire department in their due diligence was concerned about that particular use of storage containers, where there may be a storage container elsewhere on an industrial site that is used for something, and the fire department has seen it, and it doesn't pose a similar concern. So I do have that, I do share that concern, or respect that concern as put forward by the fire department. Are there opportunities to ventilate these airtight containers or deal with other safety aspects? I would leave that for staff to consider in the motion that were put forward, but don't think, just look at my notes here. Yes, that concludes my remarks. Seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question. All those in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for your patience in coming to this on the agenda this evening. I'll now move to, if I'm in correct order and I can be corrected, we'll move to item 11B, which is development permit application number DP 100790, which is for the development application for 2369 and 2373 Malaview to allow the construction of 2 residential buildings, each containing 4 townhouse dwellings. We have a report from staff dated August the 6th.
I'll move the recommendation that development permit application number DP 100790 at 2369 and 2373 Malaview Avenue be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for further review and comment.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First thing I'd like to point out, I am impressed by the price point that I asked you, that you're targeting people that can actually hopefully get into a home. That's an important part in our community. There are some things that are a little troubling for me. I know you made reference to the development on Rest Haven being the same sort of, but that, as I recall, was a much larger space. So this is, I feel like it's a lot crammed into, looking at it from the street, putting 8 in there. I know it's probably, everything fits within what it's supposed to, but it just seems like a really big footprint on a small space for my take. The other thing I was thinking about when I looked at that is, and I know you're providing the amount of parking you're allowed, and it sort of ties into having 8 units, and as I think too many for that space, is that there's no guest parking. And I reflect on the fact that right next door at 2363 there is a home-based business of a chiropractor. And from my recollection, there was a staff member that parked on the street, and then usually there would be 2 cars, one client being served, one waiting. So I'm a little concerned about what might happen in terms of overflow parking on that little section of road there. It's quite small, and it's used quite regularly. The other side, probably more concerning for me, is the tree aspect, and I'm glad that we're saving the Gary oak, replacing the other 2 trees with 4 trees, which is great. But as I look in the staff report, I see there was 19 trees there, and we've just had the urban forest strategy, and we talked about tree canopy and wanting to keep a net zero. And I'm thinking if we have a development like this, where we had 19 trees and now we're having potentially 5, maybe I don't know how many more you're going to plant, we're in a net loss there. And if other developments come forward like this consistently, we're not going to meet that net zero target. We're going to actually be losing percentage coverage. And I know it's not within your confines of this development, but I would hope going forward that there's got to be a way that we can do development where we actually incorporate existing trees somehow. And I know it's probably more costly in terms of a monetary nature, but I think the cost for our society is much greater for future generations if we don't start doing that. So I look at that and I see all the trees on there and I see them gone, and I just tie into what we were just been talking about, and I'm thinking one development follows another like this, then next thing you know, in 5 years we're at 12% coverage and then 10%. We want to be going the other way. So I don't know how you can do that, or how you can, I'm not a developer, I'm not a builder, but how we can go forward trying to incorporate what's already there in terms of mature trees and ones that are growing to maintain them. So anyway, those are some of the concerns I have, and it's something I think maybe we're going to have to deal with more deeply at the OCP review we have. But just something to put out for developers, just something to keep in mind, that I think it's something we, as a community and a council and developers, we have to work together to try and meet our targets and get them higher even. So thank you.
Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll bring forward the comments that I'm hearing from council when it comes up at APC. But one of the things I guess I'd want to comment on is that the zoning allows 55% lot coverage, and they're only proposing 37. And the base FAR is 0.75, and bonus would allow them to go up to 1.3, so they could, do quite a bit of mass. This is actually 0.76, which is almost the base. So the zoning would allow the proponent to do something more substantial with a lot more lot coverage, and he's not doing it. And I appreciate the other, the concerns that are being raised, but this actually looks pretty good to me compared with what might have come forward, and I'm sure that APC will try to make it better.
I will just briefly add that this application does not have any variance requests, and so is within the zoning. But I concur with Councillor Garnett, and I think it speaks to one of the reasons that we've initiated a comprehensive OCP review, is that we do wish to consider, have the community consider a balance amongst many factors, including density, urban forest canopy, parking, and so on. So while those concerns are expressed, you did refer to the upcoming OCP consultations, which do not impact this particular development request at this time. But thank you for those comments. Seeing no other comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I'll now move to item 11C, which is 2019 road project reprioritization. We have a report from staff dated August the 2nd.
I'll move the recommendation that the 2019-2023 financial plan be amended as follows. Defer McDonald Park paving project to 2020. Defer the Bestridge Place paving project to 2022. Add the Bevan Avenue 7th to 130 meters south paving project to 2019. Increase the budget for Epco Drive, Weiler to Ocean by $25,000. Increase the budget for 7th Street, Beacon to Bevan by $20,000.
Second.
Discussion? I'll only add the comment within the staff report that all the projects in this report are funded from the infrastructure replacement reserve, And the net result of the recommended amendments is that there would be a lower anticipated draw on the reserve in 2019. So we thank staff for that report. Now call the question. All those in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to item 11D, the tender award for the 2019 paving program contract number 2019-005. We have a report from staff dated August 2nd.
I'll move the recommendation that the contract for the 2019 paving program, contract number 2019-005, be awarded to the low bidder, Island Asphalt Company, at a total cost of $278,350 plus taxes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Councillor Rintoul.
If I may, through the mayor to staff, I note between this item and 11E that it looks like we've had 3 paving companies express interest or respond to RFPs. Is that the norm? Is there just the 3, and is that why we've seen that level of response when we go to tender?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, yeah, generally there's 2 main contractors that for paving work that we see bids from, a third one on occasion on smaller projects.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll move to item 11E, which is a tender award for the West Sydney Highway Path, contract number 2019-002. We have a report from staff dated August 6th and a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that the contract for the 2019 West Side Cycle Path project be awarded to Five Star Paving Company Limited at the option A bid price of $217,710.90, excluding taxes, and 2, that the capital budget for this project be increased by $40,000, drawing from the gas tax funding.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
Just a short.
Councillor Fallon.
Yeah. I'm disappointed we're not able to do the entire path. It's desperately in need of rejuvenation, but I would rather have a section done properly than the path being patched and what. One question I do have to staff is what is being done for route mitigation, because there's quite a bit of encroachment onto the pathway. How do we stop that or deal with that?
Through the mayor to Councillor Fallot. So for the contract that's let, in the section that we're doing, we will be placing root guard through the areas where there are those trees within the right-of-way area to help mitigate future root damage from those trees.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess for anybody on the west side who tunes into the video at this point, I shared Councillor Fallot's disappointment that we could only do that part of the path, but having worked on the west side, I know that for workers going there, a lot of the time it's easier to simply come off the pedestrian overpass and walk down McDonald Park Road, and of course that came up in one of the previous ones that we just approved about looking at kind of redoing that road and having to discuss McDonald Park Road with North Saanich. So I'm feeling hopeful, confident in our 2 municipalities that we can come up with a way to actually move people in that area that, in combination with this cycle path that mostly hits that residential area, and where I know kids are using that for school and getting to the playground, and that's really important, but that the workers who are using that corridor, we can give them something better over on the other side on the McDonald Park Road. And so this pathway, it will be less important, and we'll still be getting to that corridor anyway.
Thank you for those comments. I might, excuse me, I might add that while it would be nice to have done the entire path, I'm quite pleased that that staff has recommended going in this direction. Council will recall, and members of the public, that there was another engineering project scheduled to commence this year on Gallerin, and there were engineering challenges with that. We chose to have a town hall with a presentation from staff and council in attendance taking questions, and during that, while we certainly heard about the importance and expectations for the Galeran Road curb and sidewalk improvements, there was also expression of interest in having this walkway upgraded in a substantial manner because it's used frequently. And I think it's a significant improvement to widen it from 1.5 to 2.5 meters. Of course, that is going to cost more, and of course, the engineering required to deal with the roots situation is adding to the cost of that. But I think in the long run, this will be much improved and much appreciated by the Galeran residents in the area. With no other comment, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll just take a 2-minute recess for a moment. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, we should. Do those windows open? I wonder if that would make a difference.
I was thinking about that.
Oh, well, I was going to say we're in the home stretch, but we're not really yet, are we?
We still have in camera to go.
I know. Ugh.
This is why I would prefer to have 2 meetings a month in the summer rather than 1.
Yeah.
Because the level of activity is up enough, and condensing because you're worried about time is not a good approach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's a few heavy topics here too.
Yes, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But if we had 2 meetings, they would have split over 2. We wouldn't have to do it all in one.
Yeah, I actually used to do fitness breaks.
Yeah, we could do like.
I used to end it by
do jumping
with
jacks.
1 leg, with 2 legs, with both legs.
A little bit of yoga.
Actually, the way I used to end it, it doesn't matter how many people you had in the room. You ask them to form a circle and just pick a hand, and then ask them to entangle themselves, and you can get a perfect circle without people breaking their hands. Okay, we've reconvened. Thank you. I'll now move to item 11F, which is the budget variance report for the first half of 2019. A report from staff dated August 6th and a recommendation.
I'll move receipt for information.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll briefly comment. It is a 14-page report. It's very comprehensive. I want to thank staff for the detail in the many items in the report. It is helpful to council and very informative. I'll now call the question. All those in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. Now I'd like to move to item 11G, which is tax exemption request, of which there are 3. We have a report dated from staff August 6th and a recommendation.
I'll move approval of the renewal of the Abbey Fields permissive exemption for a period of 10 years.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, I'm sorry. Was just a question through the staff. Was 10 years in the staff report?
The recommendation was either 5 to align it with the bulk of them so that they can all be considered at one time, but that's not critical. Another potential recommendation was to treat care facilities differently and make the time span shorter in case it became a problem to, in case too many applications came forward from that type of property. Therefore, they could be reviewed on a more regular basis.
Thank you for that clarification. Do we have any, Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I'm in support of the renewal, the term I had in mind was 5 years, and I take the point as noted in the report as well that, you know, perhaps even a shorter duration given the number of facilities of this nature and the possibility that we may see more. We haven't, as is noted in the staff report at present. Yeah, I don't know if it's considered a friendly amendment or not, but if it was more aligned to the 5 years as in the recommendation, I think I'd be more comfortable with that.
I'd consider that a friendly amendment.
The seconder? Yeah. Okay, so we're now considering a 5-year term. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm having some difficulty with this one. Because I don't think that we should be setting policy on permissive tax exemptions just based on whether how many people might come forward. So it seems that we're accepting this as a care facility, but I don't know what definition we're using for care facility. So although I don't doubt that I visited Abbey Field. I went to their Christmas party and enjoyed that. But in my mind, I wouldn't characterize it as a care facility. It seems like it's a place where a group of seniors live together and with some common sort of shared activities. You know, one of the other things that they talked about in the application is the benefit, you know, that there's programs and services offered to the community. So when I think about programs and services being offered, I'm thinking about something like the Shoal Center that offers a broad range of activities and programs for the community. And while there might have been a few things at Abbey Field, I guess I, you know, struggled a little bit in terms of that particular community benefit. And I guess also that's in my mind is that although offering these permissive exemptions to these organizations doesn't impact the revenue that the town gets, it just means that other citizens have to take up the slack. And so I'm thinking about, there's other seniors out there that I'm sure that are also maybe struggling to get by in terms of, you know, their accommodation, and so we're putting an additional burden on those people. I know we didn't really have a discussion about this in our strategic planning session. There's some comments in the legislation about, you know, making sure that our permissive tax exemptions are linked to our strategic objectives. So I guess for now I'm not completely convinced, but I'm willing to hear what other people have to say.
Councillor Duncan and Councillor Fallon.
Thank you. I had initially, when I was thinking about it, the same issues about considering it as a care home and whether that was the criteria we looked at for the tax exemption. But as Councillor O'Keefe talked about, it isn't necessarily that it's a care home so much as this kind of cooperative facility. The idea that this is a group of residents who kind of share these resources and live together, and that has very extreme, I mean, it's actually probably the biggest thing you can do for the health of seniors is having that social support. They say loneliness is the #1 killer, right? So to me, the idea of, even if it wasn't considered a care home, if it was the kind of facility that offered that kind of group thing, that kind of cooperative or co-housing model, co-housing, that's the word I've been looking for, that co-housing model, if we were looking at giving co-housing models permissive tax exemptions, would I still be for it? Yeah, I would, because that would be helping to incent something that's better for the community overall. It does increase the tax burden on those of us who live in, say, single-family residences. But at the same time, if that means that it makes it easier for new things to be built that would be more supportive of seniors to stay in our community rather than to live alone, then I would consider that a net positive in the end, and that probably the resources that so much of our tax dollars go to towards mental health or having these other medical facilities like Shoreline Medical Society right there, a lot of their calls are probably mental health or the kind of chronic illnesses that can be better monitored by people living in that community thing. I think overall it will end up lowering tax burdens for everybody. It would be very hard to quantify in kind of the way that Mr. Hisik will end up having to do. but overall, I feel comfortable with it, and with the 5 years, just to kind of coordinate that and kind of keep that as something, a shorter time period, so we can continue evaluating whether that's still working for us.
Councillor Pellet.
Thank you. I share a lot of the comments that Councillor Duncan just raised, but I also have some concerns along the lines with Councillor O'Keefe. My real concern is that we don't have a specific policy of what we are exempting. And if we're going to be looking at, and I see Abbeyfield as being a senior's residence as opposed to a care home, but I suppose if they're providing meals, maybe that's a level of care. But that being secondary, if we are going to have a strategic goal and we are going to create a policy about cooperative, co-op housing, co-housing, that is something we're going to do, then that's a discussion I think we should have, and to create a policy. To do a one-off and continue to support it unless we start seeing too many other care homes coming down asking for tax exemptions, I have difficulty with that. I can't support it right now because I think I would like to see that we actually create a policy and then look at it from that perspective, rather than what the application that's before us tonight. Thank you.
Okay, before going to Councillor O'Keefe, do we have any other first-time speakers? Councillor Garnett?
I also attended the Christmas party and saw firsthand what allowing them to have this exemption means, because it was actually explained to us. And I would be remiss to pull it away. I mean, there's a caretaker that basically lives there. I don't know what definition of care home is, but she was there providing care to the residents. And these are low to modest, there are other people in the community, but they're low to modest income, and it makes a great difference to these people being able to live there. So I would feel, there's no way I could pull it at this point. Thanks.
I'd like to speak for first time, if I might. I'm very much in support of this permissive tax exemption, and wish to speak to a couple of comments by my colleagues. First, Abbeyfield has been in our community. It's a non-denominational home, first established in 1987. 32 years of providing affordable residences to low and modest income seniors. And I think that is where the significant benefit is. It provides a social environment for the individuals living there, which I think is beneficial. I've attended and had a tour of the residence. And when this was first considered by the previous council, and they made a decision on a 4-year term, as stated in the staff report, the concern or the reason for not granting a longer term was a concern that other seniors' homes, care homes, might come forward and request similar permissive tax exemption. There was one unique case in a facility, a nonprofit facility that does provide palliative care, and that was granted. With regards to establishing a policy, I think council over the years has been very considerate of permissive tax exemption. There are only 11 or 12 others in our community. If my memory serves me, and stand corrected by staff if necessary, I think there's only been 3 new permissive tax exemptions in about the last 10 years. There was the Anavets a number of years ago. Then there was Abbeyfield, and then there was the other palliative care facility that I mentioned. So it's not a case where we have a dozen in the community today that I think we're going to see an increase in either seniors' homes facilities or otherwise for additional permissive tax exemptions. I think those organizations would have come forward by now. And I'm sorry, I did have another point that I wish to make. Sorry, we should draw a distinction in our community between the for-profit senior home facilities. There are several for-profit senior home facilities. Very few of those are what would be called affordable rents, anything similar to what Abbeyfield is available to provide, and I think this is unique in terms of being a nonprofit society for the rents levels that I've mentioned earlier. Thank you. I'll now go to Councillor O'Keefe for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you for bringing up that point, because that was one of the things that's niggling around in my head, is that I'm very supportive of Abbeyfield in that model and housing, affordable housing for seniors. What I just wanted us to be very clear about, and maybe we don't need a policy, but that as to why we were doing this. And for me, it's because, as we discuss this more, it's about affordable housing for seniors, which is definitely affordable housing as a priority for us. But I didn't want to get it lumped into or be interpreted that we were doing this because it's a care facility. Because, as the mayor mentioned, there's a wide range of care facilities, and some of those are for profit. So I guess I just wanted to make that distinction about why we're doing this specifically, and it's not just for a care facility that might come forward on a for-profit basis and be able to say, oh, we give permissive exemptions for these sort of things. So I think I'm happy to go ahead with it if under that sort of common understanding that we seem to have.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? We have 1 opposed. The motion does carry. Thank you for the consideration. And now move to item 11H. We have the monthly building permit. I'm sorry. Sorry, we have 2 more tax exemptions. Please, Councillor Wainwright.
I'm supportive of the Shoreline Medical Society's request, and the report is suggesting that staff would need to work with the society to amend their lease and then include the society in the upcoming bylaw. So I'll move that council indicate support for the permissive tax exemption, and that staff work with the society to amend their lease.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So I have a couple issues with this one for the following reasons. So I guess my concerns are about, first of all, there's other clinics in Sydney. All the doctors get, I believe, the same amount of money, whether they work for a non-profit clinic or Ocean Pier Medical Clinic or whatever. So I guess one concern is about having a level playing field for all of our medical clinics in the town. So I don't see the justification in providing a exemption for this clinic and not providing it for other clinics as well. The other thing, I guess, is that to me, it's where we're helping to subsidize the medical system, and I think that's a provincial responsibility. And there's words ringing in my head from our MLA, Adam Olson, that I think he mentioned at, I don't know if it was at Health Forum or another meeting he had, about local governments resisting the urge to step in to take on financial or other responsibilities that should be with the province. And so I have some concerns about those two things. Level playing field for all medical facilities, and whether we're stepping into and provincial responsibility and taking on that financial burden that I think the province should be handling.
Thank you. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you. If I can just comment briefly. This is an opportunity for the municipality to help out and address an issue. Shoreline is expanding. They're adding doctors, and this is a means for us to help enable that in an area where the province clearly isn't making progress locally. I see the lineup outside this particular clinic on my way to work every day, and I'm really pleased to be able to support this and hopefully see this move through if staff can negotiate the lease in favor of enabling this. Thank you.
Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, I concur with Councillor Rintoul. We discussed ways we want to attract doctors to our community, and if this allows them the ability to do that and create greater space so that more people are getting family doctors. And I understand what you're saying about a level playing field, but it's got to start somewhere, and we need doctors in this community. And if this helps that at all, then I'm definitely for it.
Thank you. I'll just comment with regards to level playing field. We have a situation where through the health forum that ourselves and other municipalities sponsored, and we had over 300 people in attendance at the Mary Winspear Centre, it's very clear that the Sandwich Peninsula Hospital Foundation has worked for a number of years, and through the establishment of another nonprofit society, Shoreline Medical, is able to address the significant challenge of access to health care on the peninsula. This is a new model. This is a nonprofit organization that is operating in the clinic, which is different from how the other clinics operate. I think we see comments from the physicians, senior physicians in our community, saying that this is very different from what they were involved in when they began to practice, but see the need for medical care to move in this access to medical care to move in this direction. So I think while it would be nice for the province to step up, that we do have this opportunity, and I think it's certainly within our means and is reasonable to provide this this support. Seeing no further comment, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries with 2 opposed. Thank you.
Okay, the last one is the Greater Victoria Rental Development Society, and that's the Aranza project. And when that was first brought forward, part of the overall application was a request for a 10-year tax exemption on the residential component only, and that exemption would commence when the building occupancy occurred. So that is now the time. And the staff report is essentially telling us that if we want to actually do that, and it's pretty critical to the financing in terms of the number of units that will be affordable or how affordable they are, that we follow through on that prior approval. So the approach would be through a revitalization tax exemption, which will take some staff effort to draft up a bylaw of that nature, but I would move that staff be directed to draft a bylaw for a revitalization tax exemption for that purpose.
Second.
Discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. So I'll now move to item 11H, the monthly building permit report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to item 13, correspondence. 13A is concerns regarding short-term vacation rentals. We have
I'll move that we refer that to staff for a report.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor Garnett.
I have to say that I when I read these letters, it was something that had come up recently, looking for rental space for a family member in Sydney, and going online and there's what I found repetitively was all Airbnbs or those short-term rentals. I couldn't find spaces for a family member to rent, so I understand their concern. It's definitely a problem for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comment? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Item 13B is an update, facility engineering condition assessment. We have a letter from the Shaw Center for the Salish Sea dated July 16th.
Move receipt for information.
Second.
Discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Item 13C, we have a request for support with regards to the Royal Bay Waterfront Passenger Ferry Terminal. We have a letter from the City of Colwood dated July 22nd and a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that the Town of Sydney supports in principle the location of a passenger ferry terminal on the Royal Bay waterfront in the City of Colwood and a passenger ferry terminal in the City of Victoria, subject to further studies regarding potential impact to the shoreline, capacity of transportation infrastructure.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
I guess maybe it sounds like a good idea. However, I'm hesitant to provide support for something that doesn't directly involve our community when I'm only hearing one perspective. I don't know whether there's going to be negative impacts to the residents around Royal Bay, whether BC Ferries to pay for this might have to adjust other priorities that may inadvertently affect other communities. So I'm just hesitant to sort of toss in support for something that I'm not fully versed in. So for that reason, I would vote against the motion.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I would have normally the same misgiving, except in this case, I feel we haven't done much about the fact that we've declared a climate emergency. I feel having a passenger ferry that allows people to park on one side and starts to remove some of that traffic congestion and perceived need to build even greater highway infrastructure in that area might kind of support that objective that we have towards the climate emergency. So yeah, I don't know that we'd change anything in the letter, but that would be my rationale for it.
I'll just add that this is a support in principle, that it is subject to further studies regarding the potential impact to the shoreline and capacity of transportation infrastructure. I think there is at least a small benefit for the peninsula communities in that congestion is serious in the western communities, and this measure would alleviate some congestion in the western communities in Victoria, but we have a sizable number of employees who commute from the western communities to peninsula employers, including in Sydney, and if there is reduced congestion, that would be of some benefit to those commuters. So not necessarily a direct, but a beneficial impact, and I'll be supporting this. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favor?
Okay.
Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I'll move to item 13D, request for support with regards to a region-wide deer management strategy. We have a letter from the Township of Esquimalt dated July 30th and a recommendation.
I'll move that the town approve the letter to the minister as presented by the Township of Esquimalt.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Same thing. Basically, I just hesitate to give my support for something that I don't feel well versed in or have enough information on whether immunocontraception program is the best way to go. So I just don't feel comfortable supporting something that I don't know too much about.
Thank you. I'll just add that this is a request supported by perhaps all municipalities, if we give our support, for the province to move forward on a regional basis. While we may not see a lot of deer in downtown Sydney or in the residential neighborhoods, we have employees living elsewhere on the peninsula. Certainly North Saanich, I've seen my share of deer, particularly if out in the dusk time of the evening or early in the morning. And I think it's a safety issue for residents as they try to commute or live in their communities, and I would be supportive of this. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? We have one opposed. The motion carries. We have a request for sponsorship for the 2019 Good Food Summit with the title Growing Resilience, and a letter from the Capital Region Food and Agriculture Initiatives Roundtable dated August 2nd.
I'll move the recommendation that the request be denied.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I am still going to be in favor of denying the request. But I also just wanted to say it's not because we don't value agriculture, local agriculture, or Sydney's role in it. It's just that I think myself and perhaps other people on council feel it's the request for monetary support, and that constantly having those supports come in that are outside of our budget, we just can't continue approving one-offs that are outside of our existing strategic plan. And since we don't have a direct local agriculture part of our strategic plan, supporting this would just be outside of our scope.
Seeing no other comment, I'll just I'll call the question and then make a comment. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Perhaps council could consider a subsequent resolution that we respond with a letter to the organization stating that we denied the application over concerns that there was not a specific amount requested and that they did not proceed through our normal budgeting cycle, grants and aid or otherwise, and that if they wish to consider in the future that they go through that process.
So moved.
I'll call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We have the notice of motion for a review of the mandate of the VFCYJ Committee, Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee, a letter from that committee dated August the 6th, and a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that Councillor B. Fallett coordinate with Councillor H. Gartshore to provide a response prior to CRD Governance and Finance Committee meeting on September 4th, 2019.
Second.
Discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to item 14B, which is under bylaws, and we're now considering bylaw number 2175, cannabis and the cannabis and liquor licensing fee bylaw to establish fees for cannabis and liquor license applications. And we have two recommendations that should be moved separately.
I'll move that the bylaw be adopted.
Discussion. All those in favor? Motion. Those opposed? The motion carries with one opposed.
Okay, and I'll move that policy DV015 liquor and cannabis licensing be approved.
Discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? We have two opposed, and the motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move to, I have two items of new business. We have the item 15A, cancellation of the regular council meeting on September 23rd, 2019, as council members are attending the UBCM conference in Vancouver.
I'll move the recommendation that the September 23rd, 2019 regularly scheduled council meeting be cancelled, and two, that a special council meeting be held on Monday, September 16th, 2019, following the regularly scheduled committee of the whole meeting.
Second.
Discussion. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And we'll move to the amended part of the agenda, item 15B, which is item 1616 from Correspondence for Information. A letter from the District of Saanich regarding the Victoria Regional Transit Commission's Youth Transit Passes dated July 18th.
Thank you. I'll try to make it quick. I see this letter, and I think that there's a core of a good idea in here. Initially, when I first saw it and it was being put forward as a climate mitigation strategy, I didn't think it necessarily was, because youth, by definition, usually aren't taking a lot of cars. They're getting rides places or whatever. They don't have those cars. They're not the commuters. But then I watched a webinar that the FCM put on about Kingston's model and how they kind of rolled in over time youth transit passes, and saw this increase in ridership that they were able to phase in over time with partners from the school district. And then they felt that after about 7 years, it was not only revenue neutral, but they'd actually started to be revenue positive, because by then, parents of the children who'd been riding the buses with them were more likely to buy passes. The children, once they left school, were more likely to buy passes. And so the idea that this was normalizing bus ridership and getting people used to it at a young age did seem to be bearing some fruit. And so for that reason, I think there's a core of a good idea. The way it's currently being rolled out with Victoria and Saanich and individual municipalities putting forward these motions, I feel is not useful. So what I want to move is that at a later meeting, we put on the agenda to have Mayor McNeil Smith bring a motion forward to the Transit Committee of the CRD to actually make a recommendation about what a regional subsidized transit strategy might look like, whether it's restricted just to youth or a subset of the youth, or even looking at the ideas about some of the people, the elderly people. And I know that there's on August 13th a meeting that the BC Transit Commission is having, where they're looking at this issue and they're looking at the financial implications and discussing some options. And then of course the BC or the CRD Transit Committee will be having a meeting where they'll probably discuss the same thing. So I want to leave what the actual motion that we will be making at that meeting up to what comes out of that, whether we are supporting something that they come up with or whether something the mayor is able to bring back with. I just wanted to be able to move that we continue that discussion at a later date, that we kind of have when the results of those discussions come out, we receive those to our council so that we can discuss it at that time rather than just have it slide us by.
So if I could just perhaps clarify that. So if the motion was speaking to, we could move this letter forward, but also request staff to bring forward the discussion or minutes from the Transit Commission meeting that is commencing tomorrow on the topic of they are considering a number of things with regards to subsidized youth transit passes. If that information could be brought forward to a September council meeting, and that council could then have a discussion, whether it be at committee of the whole or council, with regards to next steps. If we leave it at that, I might comment that with regards to consideration of me taking this as a CRD representative sitting on the Transportation Committee, we're not certain at this time that the Transportation Committee of the CRD actually has jurisdiction to bring this forward for CRD service, because we do have the Victoria Transit Commission. And so hence my suggestion with regards to your motions. So.
Yeah, so your clarification was simply to bring it forward to have the minutes of the CRD Transit Commission meeting brought forward for a discussion at a September meeting and scrap the stuff about the transit. Yeah.
Sorry, do we have a second there? Second. Discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I'll move to item 16. We have the remaining 17 pieces of correspondence for information.
Move received.
Second.
Call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We have no notices of motion. We have the number 18, our motion to go on camera.
I'll move that it is in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters relating to legal and personal issues pursuant to section 90.1 A, E, and G of the Community Charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you to staff this evening. Move adjournment. Didn't we just
Move adjournment.
a motion to adjourn, please?
Move adjournment.
All in favor? Thank you. We'll take a very short recess.